In a historic moment, ladies and gentlemen, the Republicans, by one vote, have successfully impeached DHS Secretary Mayorkas for his failure to uphold the law on the border, as well as many other issues. And this is tremendous and great news. Why? Because now nothing happens. That's it. Nothing happens. It will be passed off to the Senate, and McConnell will throw it in the garbage, and we can all pretend like something got done. But I will say, at least there is something symbolic, I suppose. I'll take it, I guess. The reality is nothing will happen after this. However, look, with a slim majority in the House, there's not a whole lot more you could ask for other than public statements, symbolic victories. And I do think the fact that Republicans are pushing back against the fails on the border is tremendously good for Republicans in an election year, considering even Democrats have begun to say invasion. Now, in terms of real news, today, the governor of Georgia announced that they will be deploying National Guard troops to Texas to assist with the border crisis. Now, that sounds a bit more substantial, so we'll talk about that, plus a bunch of other stories. But my friends, before we do, head over to eyesofadvice.com, and you'll be redirected to iTunes if you're using your Apple device, or if you have iTunes installed on your computer. You can then pre-order the new song we are putting out called Eyes of Advice, which will be released on the 23rd. This song has a message of sorts, I suppose, and the music video took a lot of work. It's the most amount of work we've put in a music video, and it is very, very, I just describe it as an art song. I don't expect this to be like a pop wonder, but I think it's really, really amazingly done in terms of CGI. Shout out to Kent. Again, eyesofadvice.com if you want to pre-order the single on iTunes. And by doing so, you'll be supporting the work we do, and we can build more cultural efforts and expand our cultural endeavors. But also head over to timcast.com, click join us, become a member to support our work directly, and you'll get access to the members only uncensored show tonight and every Monday through Thursday at 10 p.m. Additionally, you will also get access to Timcast IRL Super Tuesday tickets in Martinsburg, West Virginia. It's basically the DC Metro for those that know where, but it's also about 2 hours from Pittsburgh. So it's a wide range of where you could be and easily have access to this. Powered by Good Ranchers. Shout out for sponsoring the show. We are very grateful. And we're just now announcing it right now. So we'll still have many more shout outs for the event, but you have to be a member to get tickets because this is a private event, and that's very important. It's at our private club, and only members are allowed to show up if you bought tickets. There's also going to be more announcements for elite members, so stay tuned. But you'll also get access to our Discord server where you can hang out with like-minded individuals. And if you're in the Discord, you can submit questions, call in, and talk to us and our guest on the members only after show. So smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Joining us tonight to talk about all of this and more is Michael Tracey.
Hello. How's it going?
Who are you? What do you do?
Good question. I never really thought about it.
You're a journalist?
Yeah, I'm a journalist. I was here in November of 2020. I looked it up just to confirm the date.
That's crazy.
This is my second time.
Just
yeah, it's been a while. It was just after the 2020 election.
But I guess you kind of fit in this space that's similar to, like, I guess, Matt Taibbi and you know, to try and maybe Barry Weiss. Not that you guys agree on everything, but you're considered maybe like, I don't know, anti-establishment, or how would you describe your reporting? Like maybe actual journalism?
Well, I don't want to be too pompous or self-aggrandizing. Anti-establishment, I mean, depends how you define establishment, I guess. I don't associate actively with any establishment. But yeah, I mean, there was a time where there was like a formation of people in the media landscape who were seen as maybe a bit more heterodox, or were being ostracized more and more from liberal media milieus where that they had once comfortably inhabited, that I was maybe considered amongst that group.
I think one of the best pieces of some of the best work you've done, one way to put it, was when you traveled around the country and went to all the smaller towns that have been affected by the Summer of Love riots, the George Floyd riots. And there was this narrative that it wasn't bad and it was peaceful protests. And then you actually wrote this really long piece showing photos from even small towns that were massively impacted by vandalism and destruction. And so I thought that was good. And of course, it really angered more establishment actors and, you know, maybe like Democrat personalities who don't want that narrative coming out. But I suppose the easiest way to describe it is you actually just did journalism, you know, irrespective of any kind of power structure. So
yeah, that was a big one. That was so simple too. All I did was just take a nationwide car trip to small, medium, and large size cities where there was some rioting or protest activity underway that had been very conspicuously undercover. Like, just to give you one example of plenty that I could give, I just happened passing by Fort Wayne, Indiana. Probably not a place that most people would make a point to stop at, just because it's not that noteworthy or remarkable. Nothing against it, but it's not like a major landmark, right? And I went, and it turned out that there had been the biggest riots in the living memory of people who lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that I just came across. Same with like Green Bay and places where you wouldn't even hear that there had been riots, but sometimes there had been the most wide scale riots in the city's history in a lot of different places. So I went to that, and like a lot of people thought that I was trying to actively undermine.
You're a Trump supporter.
A Trump supporter or something. Yeah, no, which was never my intent. Ironically, one of the women I found in Minneapolis who had her beauty shop burnt down. This was in North Minneapolis that is heavily black. It was an older black woman, encountered her. She was talking about how she had been getting all ready to start up her beauty parlor after COVID had shut it down for a couple months. Because remember, this was like May, June of 2020. So it was just when some states were beginning to allow businesses to resume activity. And like the weekend that she was going to reopen, it got burned down.
Wow.
And the conservative media was also so derelict on that story, because it fell to me to write a column about this woman. It actually was in the Wall Street Journal. And then Mike Pence referenced her in the vice presidential debate with Kamala Harris, and they flew her out. They flew this woman out to be like attendees at the debate.
Wow.
So even though I wasn't trying to like proffer material for the Republicans necessarily, there were so few people doing that basic journalistic work that I ended up as a source in that way.
That's another big story today too. I think it's Paramount just announced mass layoffs, which includes a few prominent journalists like Catherine Herridge. So she's been a big thorn in the side of the current administration and establishment. But we'll get into all that. Thanks for hanging out. We got Libby hanging out.
I'm hanging out. How's it going, guys? Nice to see everybody.
You too.
And you are.
I'm Libby Emmons. I'm with the Post Millennial. I'm glad to be here.
And I'm back. I'm back from Cincinnati. I did a wild debate with Destiny over the weekend that was awesome. Really? It's on his channel. Yeah, it was super cool. I worked with Progressive Victory. They were canvassing Cincinnati, got like knocked on 40,000 doors getting people registered to vote. And then Steven, Destiny, he and I sat in a church with a big crowd of people and talked about voter integrity. It was like an hour and a half, kind of like surface level, because we didn't have time to get too deep into anything. And at points I was like, I feel like I'm the guy. I'm like, but dude, I got an idea. Blockchain. Like I started to become that guy, and I was like, I got to lay off this blockchain rhetoric, because they kept asking me questions like, well, go deeper on the. I'm like, I can't go deeper.
Most people don't know what it is.
But I want to back up our voting.
Was in Cincinnati?
This was in Cincy, yeah. And the concept was, how can we improve voter integrity? I was like, well, if you have a backup, all these blockchains as backup. Anyway, we can go into that. Go watch the debate.
We'll get into it later.
Yeah.
We got Serge pressing the buttons.
Yeah, it was good.
Thanks,
Big
dog.
fan. Yeah, good work. I'm Serge.com. Thanks for coming, man. Let's get into
roll.
it. Yeah.
I did a 3-hour stream with Destiny once, and then it was about like mostly Ukraine. And I didn't realize until the 3 hours were up that he had been playing video games the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know that was a thing.
He had an organ on stage that he never turned around and played on.
I didn't know I developed like an incredible multitasking muscle to just be constantly playing video games no matter what else you're doing.
Yeah. Let's jump into this first story. We had this from CNN. House impeaches Alejandro Mayorkas, first cabinet secretary to be impeached in almost 150 years. Wow. They say the results came 1 week after the stunning loss House Republicans suffered when they tried to impeach Mayorkas, and GOP defections and an absence sank the initial House floor vote. Last week, the absence of House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and the surprise attendance by Texas Democrat Al Green, who had just had surgery and was wheeled into the chamber to vote, denied Republicans a majority. However, we now have the victory here. Only one cabinet official has previously been impeached in American history. Secretary of War William Belknap in 1876. Did not know that. The embarrassing initial defeat of the Mayorkas impeachment effort was quickly followed up by another floor failure over a standalone Israel aid package. Only crystallized the GOP's year-long struggle. Blah, blah, blah. We get it. The good news is, after this, following the banging of the gavel, celebrations from Republican House members, they will handily hand over their resolution to Mitch McConnell, for which he will promptly put it into the shredder, walk away, and go back to selling out the United States to foreign adversaries and dictators and war machines, et cetera, et cetera.
You guys said nothing's going to happen from it, and Michael, you specified because they needed 2/3 in the Senate for this to go through, and you just think that's DOA.
To convict.
But hold on. not only do they need 2/3, they actually need the speaker, or they need anyone to actually bring it to a vote. So it's likely going to be thrown in the garbage. That's it.
So first the
Chuck
Senate.
Schumer would have to affirmatively schedule a vote or schedule hearings. And it's not even clear that there's a constitutional obligation for him to do so. It's uncharted territory. So there will be a lot of debate over what's actually required of Schumer at this juncture, because it's a little bit different, as far as I understand it, from a presidential impeachment. Like, there are less mandatory steps that kick in once the impeachment takes place. Although there was even debate that when Trump was impeached the first time and Republicans controlled the Senate.
You want to grab your mic?
And the Republicans controlled the Senate, that McConnell might not even be obliged to hold impeachment hearings in that eventuality. So it's like, it's open-ended as to what is required of anyone here.
Nothing's going to happen.
No, I mean, it's really, it's what's been going on in the House this whole time. They can pass anything they want, but it's never going to get taken up. It's never going to go anywhere.
I will be fair, okay? We can't expect that much. They have a very slim majority in the House. They don't have the Senate, nor the White House, so I don't know what more anyone could expect. That being said, in an election year, Republicans getting this declaration that we are actively trying to do something, whether it's effective or not, or whether it's just politicking, is still going to be good for Republicans, because you've got Democrats in every major city freaking out about the illegal immigration crisis, and to the point where I think it was it Al Sharpton called it an invasion.
Yeah.
So when you've got man, it's getting bad in Chicago. The black community coming out, specifically criticizing the mayor over what's going on with illegal immigration. They don't care about the Democrat, Republican. They're just like, why is this happening? Why are our community centers and schools being handed over? Why aren't you doing anything about it?
That's happening in Boston too. It's
Absolutely.
really pretty bad. And in Chicago too. Did you see the mayor came out and he said $17 million is going specifically to black and brown businesses to feed the illegal immigrants in shelters? He's like, but I'm giving you money.
Yep.
Yeah, it's still not enough.
Amazing.
But what
Yeah.
does impeaching the Homeland Security Secretary do to substantially address any of that?
It doesn't have to actually do anything.
Right.
It's as simple as this. The average person who is experiencing hardship does not follow the news, does not know who Mayorkas is, does not know what his job is, but they will hear breaking news that Republicans have impeached him over the border crisis. And they're going to go, wow, well, at least someone's doing something.
We're
and
trying, yeah.
And if you go to the average person and ask them, what was Mayorkas' job? I mean, many conservatives are going to be like, I don't know. And if you go to the average person who's complaining about illegal immigrants, they're going to be like, don't know, don't care. I mean, look, I can tell you, I can put it this way. With all due respect to the average person who may hear this passively and it may change their mind, I don't expect the majority of the United States, of the average working person, to know the full details of what the DHS secretary is supposed to be doing, what he should have done. This is why they vote for people they trust. It's representative constitutional republicanism. And so when they say, I don't know the intricacies of Mayorkas' job, what I do know is that he's supposed to be the person working the border. He's not. It's really simple. You fire the guy. Okay, well, guess what? Republicans can come out and say, we tried to fire him, and the Democrats would not follow through because it takes the House and the Senate to move forward with the impeachment. And Democrats in the Senate said, we're not interested in firing this guy. So if you're concerned about immigration, vote for us. We're trying.
But Republicans also say that Mayorkas is simply implementing Biden's immigration policy. So you could swap out anybody to preside over the Department of Homeland Security, and it wouldn't change the ultimate policy if it's coming from the top down.
Fair point. They should impeach Joe Biden too.
They should do.
But
yeah,
but there's a political reason why they're not going to. Joe Biden, with his brain turned to jelly, how does he win? I mean, Jon Stewart came out with his new Daily Show, his return to the Daily Show yesterday. It's being praised by everybody. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. Democrats are furious over it.
They don't like it.
Republicans are cheering. They're like, he spends the first half of it. He does rag on Trump, but boy, does he really roast Biden for having a broken brain. So they don't want to impeach Joe Biden because they think they're going to beat him at the ballot box. They have an open impeachment, quote, inquiry against Biden on unrelated stuff. I know it really is simply politics. If they do impeach him, Democrats might go, no, wait, don't. And then Schumer is going to come out and be like, I think it's only fair that we actually hear what our senators have to say about this. And then he gets impeached.
That is an anti-Semitic accent you just did. Please
I'm just doing it.
That was a New York accent.
That was a New York.
To be fair,
and then they're going to bring in Newsom or somebody else. Like, I don't know, Kamala Harris will be like, I'm not here to, I stand by Joe or whatever. And something happens. Republicans don't want to give them the opportunity to swap out their brain dead president.
I think there are potentially some reasons to be worried or to raise concerns about the House of Representatives, in particular, increasingly resorting to extreme methods of registering disapproval. So this is the first impeachment of a cabinet officer since, what was it, 1876?
1876.
The Democrats under Trump, as we remember, did 2 impeachments.
They tried many more.
I think they were pretty satisfied with getting 2 in one presidential term. Of Trump, I mean, a presidential impeachment.
Of Trump, there were several attempts at presidential impeachments that failed.
Of
Yes.
Trump?
Yes.
I think once Democrats took the House after the 2018 midterms, they basically immediately launched into a precursor impeachment investigation and then a full-fledged investigation.
There were several attempts under the Democrats, but Pelosi was like, no, and they kept getting defeated.
Yeah, there was a push after the Mueller report.
But they actually introduced articles of impeachment several times.
Oh, yeah. Individual members of Congress do that all the time.
And there were votes on it, and it kept failing until finally, Ukraine.
But the point is, you have Congress using more and more often censure resolutions, which used to be pretty rare. Remember, the Democrats in, 2021 censured Paul Gosar for tweeting a meme clip of AOC and Biden like in an anime thing, which is ridiculous. They claimed that it was like literal violence. And then what happened? Well, Republicans reciprocated by passing censure resolutions against, Rashida Tlaib got it in November for basically being against critical of Israel.
Yeah, but look,
so more and more, and then you had the expulsion of George Santos in December, which was without any due process.
For that.
Right. So the House is resorting to more and more extreme and frequent indications of these previously rarely used powers that's just going to become this endless tit for tat. And I think it's almost a sure thing now that Democrats will retaliate against this and impeach, a Republican cabinet official.
And the problem is, it is a pendulum swing with no way to stop it.
Right.
Because if the Republicans say, we're going to take the high road and just keep acting normally, the Democrats will just keep beating the crap out of them. So the Republicans respond with, okay, well then we'll swing back. We'll give them a tit for tat. Because if you don't, I mean, this starts with Democrats. The investigations, the lies, the smears of Trump and Russiagate. The Trump era was the beginning of the psychotic behavior. Granted, Russiagate started even before Trump got elected. They went nuts.
I think the pushback of the pendulum is the people themselves, because if Congress starts to go crazy, if they really start to do that, it's our job to make sure that doesn't happen. As a people, we are in control of our government. We are the government. They're representing us. And if they get haywire, then that's bad for them.
We got to vote them out.
We do have to vote them out.
I
think they forget that all the time. I think they forget that they're ours.
I think
we don't serve them; they serve us.
Anyone who voted to expel Santos has disqualified themselves, 100%. And it's not because I like Santos. It's because he was not convicted of any wrongdoing. And by all means, maybe he will be. But if that's the case, I would accept if they said, "Look, he has been indicted. Therefore, we will suspend him pending an outcome." Okay, that's fine. If someone gets charged with a crime and it's a serious offense, we will put them in jail pending the outcome. I'm not a big fan of locking people up who can't, I actually am a fan of bail reform. I just don't know that the way New York handles it is the appropriate way to do it. But I think it's a simple argument that if someone is indicted on a crime, depending on the severity of the crime, we can put them in a box and close the door and lock it until we actually resolve this through a trial. It's supposed to be a speedy trial. That being said, in this instance, I'm not saying Santos should be locked up. I think it would have been reasonable if they voted for temporary suspension of committee. And
they do that in the Senate, like Robert Menendez, who was indicted a few months ago. He was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which is one of the most powerful positions in the Senate, and he then had to step down once he was indicted, because that's a matter of Senate rules. I don't know that the House has a comparable rule, but I'm sort of wary of even imposing any punishment on Santos when he's merely indicted. That's just a set of accusations by the government. That's still imposing a punishment on him absent due process.
I agree. I think they should have done nothing and said, prove it or else.
And by the way, the same goes for Menendez, because he was indicted by the DOJ a couple of years ago, and it went to a hung jury. So
my point is, it is absolutely unreasonable to expel him. The compromise could perhaps be in suspending pending an outcome of the indictments. And I equate that to a guy is accused of murder. We lock him up until the resolution of the trial, in which many people get found not guilty and are released. I mean, Kyle Rittenhouse spent 2 months in jail. I don't like the fact that it turns out innocent people ended up doing time while we're trying to figure things out. My point is, in my personal opinion, Santos should be still in Congress, and he should say, prove it or else. But my point is, it is completely unreasonable to remove him. Yeah, you get my point.
Yeah, and his alleged offenses are comparatively trivial. in relation to what other members of Congress could be theoretically punished for, because Santos was the first member of Congress who was expelled without first being convicted of a crime. And most of those in the past, when there was a conviction, had to do with literal treason against the country, meaning they were Confederates who were in a state of literal legal rebellion. I mean, in 2002, I think it was, James Traficant was the congressman who was previously expelled before Santos, and he was actually convicted of a crime. So if you're gonna, for some reason, make this Ohio.
Oh, it was Ohio. Okay.
If you're gonna, I mean, that guy was a character too. He died in a tractor accident. But if you're gonna sweep aside all precedent and expel Santos without him first being convicted of a crime, and for the conduct to be that he lied about being on a college volleyball team, you're cheapening the tactic. So now it's just going to be used even more commonly for lesser and lesser grave offenses.
To simplify everything, check which district you're in, look at who voted to expel Santos, and campaign against them. That's just it. I think.
Well, it's the New York Republicans who basically generated that whole process.
Sure,
they felt that it would be politically beneficial because they felt that he would be a political albatross for them when they're running again in 2024. Because they're in marginal districts. There are some Democratic.
Each and every one that voted to oust him, I think, is ineligible. But you're not going to convince Democrats, so the Republicans need to organize. But let's jump to this story. We have this tweet from Justin Barragona, a statement from Biden on the Mayorkas impeachment. History will not look kindly on House Republicans for their blatant act of unconstitutional partisanship that has targeted an honorable public servant in order to play petty political games. That one's amazing. He continues, Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, a Cuban immigrant who came to the U.S. with his family as political refugees, has spent more than 2 decades serving America with integrity in a decorated career in law enforcement and public service. From his time in the DOJ as a U.S. attorney to his service as Deputy Secretary and now Secretary of Homeland Security, he has upheld the rule of law faithfully and has demonstrated a deep commitment to the values that make our nation great. This impeachment already failed once on a bipartisan vote. Instead of staging political stunts like this, Republicans with genuine concerns about the border should want Congress to deliver more border resources and stronger border security. Sadly, the same Republicans pushing this baseless impeachment are rejecting bipartisan plans Mayorkas and others in my administration have worked hard on to strengthen border security at this very moment, reversing from years of their own demands to pass stronger border bills. Giving up on real solutions right when they are needed most in order to play politics is not what the American people expect from their leaders. Congress needs to act to give me, Mayorkas, and my administration the tools and resources needed to address the situation at the border. The House also needs to pass Senate's National Security Supplemental right away. We will continue pursuing real solutions to the challenges Americans face, and House Republicans have to decide whether to join us to solve the problem or keep playing politics with the border. Let me just simplify all of this politically for you guys to understand what's happening. They want to open the border to thousands of illegal immigrants every day at a time when even Democrat strongholds have communities in uproar over the illegal immigration crisis. They want to send $60 billion to Ukraine. They want to send, I think it's 14.7 billion to Israel, as well as a portion of that to Taiwan. $20 billion of the dollars in the original bill would not go to securing the border. It would go to facilitating the invasion.
Well, that's what it is. It's more judges, it's more border agents, and it's all designed to get people in faster.
The bill gives Customs and Border Protection, in certain circumstances, the ability to issue work permits and adjudicate asylum claims without a court.
That's insane. And of course, that's the thing about the asylum seekers, right? Asylum seekers get work permits faster. They get access to basically federal and state aid faster.
And as Joe Rogan pointed out just about a week ago, there are certain jurisdictions that are trying to give illegal immigrants with work permits the right to vote in municipal elections. Joe Biden.
That was struck down in New York last year, but they could do it again.
But it's currently in the courts. It's under appeal. Joe Biden is doing exactly what everyone predicted. The moment this security bill would be introduced, Republicans would notice that it was the opposite of a security bill. And when they refused to play along, the Democrats would come out and say, aha, they oppose their own security bill.
When in reality, that bill was playing politics with the border, trying to call it a border bill, but giving 70% of the money goes to Ukraine and Israel. It's not a border bill. It's an Israel-Ukraine war bill that they called a border bill. That's playing politics with the thing. He said, don't play politics with the border. They just did it.
It's a Ukraine-Israel bill.
Good. Thank you for topping that off.
That's like the what was it called? The Inflation Reduction Act. And I was just reading today in Variety. It turns out that the Inflation Reduction Act made it possible for Travis Kelce to produce his first Hollywood film with federal credits from the Inflation Reduction Act.
Well, good for him.
Yay! It raised taxes on pretty much everybody, but Travis Kelce gets to produce a film.
The reason this bill was even structured in the way it was in the first place, meaning the bill that was abandoned last week, that included the immigration component, was because in September or October of last year, Republicans in the House kept saying, and some in the Senate kept saying, that although we might support in principle sending additional funds to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, we're prioritizing the border and immigration policy above all else. And so that is a required element of any bill that we would vote for. So it was Biden was proposing that as an accommodation to Republican complaints.
No.
And then the Senate Republicans designated James Lankford, who is one of the more conservative members of the caucus, or was seen as one before last week, who came up with a bill that, if you compare it to previous attempts to pass comprehensive immigration reform, and I'm kind of neutral on that anyway, like I don't care one way or the other that much, but like in 2013 and the 2007, when there were these bipartisan attempts to do immigration reform, they included a lot more liberal or democratic priorities, including quote unquote pathways to citizenship. This included none of that. It was strictly border enforcement. So Biden ironically was willing.
No way.
Biden was willing.
Wrong.
Biden was willing.
Definitely not accurate.
Biden was willing to totally spit in the face of the more hardline progressive immigration activists within the coalition and just go along with almost entirely Republican priorities, and Republicans chose to nuke the bill.
Did you read the bill?
Yeah, I did.
How could you possibly call it anything other than progressive? 8,500 non-citizens allowed in per day. CBP getting, in certain circumstances, the right to adjudicate asylum claims outside of the courts. The granting of work permits. The problem right now that Democrat voters in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and other major Democrat cities are complaining about is a massive influx of non-citizens sleeping in our airports, in our schools. So when they say it's a security bill that facilitates thousands, a million plus per year, that's not what Republicans are complaining about. That is Democrat gift giving. That is the only outcome of that proposal was that it would be set that the bill is dead on arrival. And then Democrats get to come out and say the security bill was rejected by Republicans.
Well, what the lead Senate negotiator, James Lankford, who I've actually spoken to in the past about Ukraine policy and other stuff, seems like a relatively normal conservative. I'm not saying, I doubt he would be doing the bidding of the Democrats just in some mischievous or nefarious way. Seemed like he was pretty sincere in what he was trying to negotiate, although I stand open to be corrected on that. And he was saying that what it would have changed, and again, I don't really frankly care that much way or another about immigration policy. It's something I'm kind of agnostic on, for better or worse. But he was saying that the status quo now is that as many as like 6 or 7 or 8,000 per day migrants approach the border. And this would be creating a new authority where if it reaches that number on any given day or over the span of a week, then asylum claims aren't even being processed anymore at the border. So he said that within the past 6 months, there would have been only 3 or 4 days where the inflow would have been low enough that they would even be processing asylum claims in the first place. They were saying that this was going to create authority that Trump had sought, that Congress hadn't even enacted, that would have given him the ability to actually shut down the processing of asylum claims, which is otherwise mandated by law.
And redirect them to ports of entry for an additional 3,500, which is not what any person who's been complaining about the border had asked for. And all it was doing was creating a legal path to facilitate the illegal activities they were doing. So when we take a look at what Texas is doing with the National Guard and why Texas is doing it, it's because there is an invasion. And those are the words of, I believe it was Al Sharpton, an invasion on our border. And you've got New York, as I mentioned, all these major Democrat cities saying we are being invaded. If this bill were to pass, it would turn the illegal actions for which Mayorkas has now been impeached into legal actions, overwhelmingly. In fact, a large portion of the people coming through give false ages. We know this is a problem. Large portion, I don't know the exact number. I'm not saying it's 90%. It could be 3% or 4%. A large portion meaning there are thousands of individuals who are between the ages of 20 and 30 who claim they're 17. The bill explicitly stated that if an unaccompanied minor came, it would not even count towards that allotment they would allow in. How about this? If Texas thinks the problem is so egregious, they have lined their border with shipping containers covered in concertina wire and have sent in the National Guard to bar CBP access. Whatever bill they tried proposing, which would actually strip authority from Texas, should be DOA. And that means Lankford and anybody else absolutely sabotaged any effort at border security. And it was predicted by basically every pundit that said when they actually propose the border bill, and we talked about it on the show, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be garbage, as it always is. I'll put it this way. There's a great meme. And it's from a progressive. And they're like introducing the Free Ice Cream for Everyone Act. And it's like, oh, wow, I'll vote for that. Approved. Now, where's my free ice cream? And they respond, what do you mean? This bans owning dogs. This is what they do every single time with every single bill. They call it the border security bill, when in fact it would allow 8,500 per day. Oh, I'm sorry. After 5,000 non-citizens breach the border and Texas and other border states are unable to stop it, they redirect 3,500 to a port of entry for the same thing. And to alleviate the courts, because there's too many, they would give CBP certain jurisdiction to issue work permits. Then you've got certain jurisdictions across the country, including Maryland. New York tried doing it. They got jammed up in the courts. Grant and California, Sacramento, doing it in San Francisco, granting non-citizens the right to vote in municipal elections and making various excuses why they're allowing them to do this. We have to say outright, maybe we should just stop allowing thousands of non-citizens to pour in through our border every day. But I'll give you this. I'm glad all of it's happening, because now I can say very plainly to Gen Z, if you're wondering why it is you can't afford an apartment, why it is that eggs are costing you $10, why you have to live in a shoebox with no bathroom with two other people, just take a look at the non-citizens who have been given luxury hotel rooms in New York City and debit cards with $3,000 on it.
Well,
and maybe
and
if we
they
stop spending that money, you might have a better future.
And now they have a curfew in place too. Adams had to put a curfew on the migrants in those hotels. So from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., they're not allowed to leave or come in. So that's a thing. And also one of the architects of the bill, Chris Murphy from Connecticut, he said that under this bill, the border never closes. And he said
we
that
meant that in terms of
pride.
commerce, like economic.
Yeah, but he also
transactions
meant that
over
in
the
terms
borders.
of migrants getting shipped from one port of entry to another. Like they would close one and open something else.
I think he more meant that in terms of
People
goods being
still get
transported
in.
over the border, but I don't know for sure. Maybe he meant it differently. I don't know. John Thune, who's the second ranking Republican in the Senate, said that this is a list, this bill contained a long list of long sought Republican priorities in terms of border enforcement, and that they would never be able to get Democrats to budge on half of these in a Republican administration. He was saying that there was much more progress made under a Democratic administration, because it's like a Nixon going to China thing, right? Only Biden or only a Democrat can actually give some concessions to immigration restrictionists in a way that will lead to sort of muted opposition among Democrats. Because if Trump was in power, then Democrats would be screaming fascism, and this is going to lead straight to concentration camps and whatnot. But with Biden, their opposition is a bit more muted and tempered. And so the political logic seemed to me to make sense that Thune was laying out, in that this is the best restrictionists could hope for in terms of a compromise in the Congress. Now, if people still don't like it, I get it. I don't particularly support it either.
What's the number? Like 1.7 million non-citizens per year? It's record breaking.
That's the
How is that a
It's more
compromise?
than that.
It's record breaking
like
now. They were going to reduce the
2.3
inflow.
this year.
Calling it
But how about you reduce the inflow by just putting razor wire on the border
Just
and
say
using
no.
CBP saying, get the out.
Well, I mean, they have, as Langford explained, I actually didn't quite realize this until maybe it was last week. Even the places on the border, I think most of Texas where there is wall or where there is fortified border barrier, the barrier itself is like a quarter to a half mile inside United States territory. So once a, quote, migrant even approaches the wall, they're on United States territory. And then according to existing law, their asylum claim has to be processed. So what Langford and others who were promoting this bill were saying was that they're going to increase the threshold for a valid asylum claim, so they'll be able to turn away more people at that exact point than they're able to now. So they're saying the status quo is 6,000 or 8,000 encounters a day, and somebody coming in, X amount coming in to be processed. This will give us the authority to turn away more.
Right.
If that's true, I don't know.
get that.
But that
And
was the argument.
And so the issue is, this is exactly what we predicted would happen, because it gives the excuse to Democrats to claim we tried to secure the border. But there is not a single reasonable person conservatives know what's happening. They're paying attention and they're furious. But now you're getting Democrats in major cities lighting up, and not a single one of them is saying, I wish there was slightly less people storming our borders. No, they're saying, stop all of it. All of it should stop.
But it's never been stopped. Trump never stopped all of it. I mean, that's why they're giving additional authority.
Yeah, but it was less than half a million people
that's
a year
not what
in
I'm talking
2020.
about.
No, but Trump, less than
but
half
hold
a
on.
million.
That's an aside. That's moving the goalpost. I'm saying people are asking the government to propose a bill that provides security to stop the influx. Not whether Trump did or didn't, or whether he could have done a better job. The issue right now is a record-breaking influx causing damage to our cities that Joe Biden himself, 20 years ago called, what did he say? It was turning the cities into ish-holes or whatever?
Yeah.
No, the point is they were seeking, the Senate was attempting to give the president additional authorities to stem that influx, including authorities that Trump sought and was not able to receive because it would have given a greater ability to stem the flow.
So right now it is illegal what they're doing. The bill would have created a legal path for the invasion. Right now, when a single person crosses the border, it's a crime. And CBP opening the barriers and bringing them in is a criminal act because they know coyotes and cartel members are the ones facilitating this. They should outright say no. U.S. policy as it pertains to kidnappings in overseas is not to negotiate with terrorist organizations. If someone gets kidnapped in the Middle East, and I don't know if this is true under Biden, but this is true under Trump, Obama, and as basically in my professional career. You get kidnapped, the United States will not negotiate with terrorists. This meant that typically Americans would be ignored. German citizens and Spanish citizens were prized possessions for kidnappers in the Middle East because their governments pay up instantly and negotiate with any terror group who kidnaps their citizens. The United States would have a helicopter flying over your compound where a bunch of guys in all black with rifles would come out, kill everybody in the compound and rescue the Americans. The American policy understood that if you negotiate with criminal factions and terrorists, you incentivize their behavior. So the best course of action is to tell them all, you touch an American citizen, you die. Now you have CBP and the Biden administration telling the cartels, you bring in trafficked humans, we take care of it for you. That I think that's a criminal action. I think we can say, okay, fine, impeach Joe Biden, whatever you want to say. But the idea, I see a video of CBP lifting up razor wire to bring these people in as coyotes and cartel members with rifles are shuttling them into the country. Mm-hmm. I'm like, we have a humanitarian crisis. We have atrocities being committed. The amount of young girls being raped by these gangs and cartels, and CBP makes it all possible with smiles on their faces to help make it happen. And now
and the NGOs that get funded by the federal government as well.
And then the Biden administration says, let's codify this and make it all legal. And I say, no, let's put a bunch of shipping containers on the border. Let's float things in the river and tell the cartels, when you bring a person, if a human being is standing alongside a coyote and a human trafficker, we consider them to be a part of your gang. You want to pay them $3,000 to traffic you through South America and Central America, through Mexico and to our border? You are working with enemies of the United States. Instead, it's compromise, roll over.
And Biden has the ability to close the border. I mean, he could just do it. He had the ability to open it. Well, the same authority he used to issue all the executive orders to blast it right open in his first days in office.
But that's what I'm saying. Even Trump did not have the authority to close the border.
Then why was it less than half a million people in 2020?
Because COVID reduced migration flows across the world. I mean, there was a record year.
Even if you go back,
2019 was a record year when Trump was in office, and I think he probably would have closed the border if he had the authority available to him. I don't know if it was an all-time record, but it was way over the maybe preceding 10 years or so when in 2019. So, I mean, it was 1.1. Right, which is a lot of people.
Well, it's not 2.3.
No, I'm not saying it. Yeah, it's less than the current inflow, but it was still a lot. The point being, there was no authority to just, quote, close the border. That's what they were trying to give to the president with this bill.
That's not
I'm
what
not
they
even
were
in favor of
trying
the
to give
bill. I actually think this gets to why House Republicans really ought not to be commended for doing this theatrical impeachment of Mayorkas, because we've agreed, I think, that it's purely symbolic. It will have no substantive impact on the policy grievances that you're laying out, rightly or wrongly. Right. It's a political stunt. It's a political ploy. It's a political ploy. It does not address the underlying substance. And also, by the way, it's accelerating the passage of this national security supplemental bill with the immigration part severed off, that is Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, which will already passed 70 to 29 in the Senate and has majority support in the House. So now the House Republicans can say, oh yeah, maybe we use like a legislative maneuver to get this mammoth $89 billion or however many billions it is, national security bill passed. But we also, mollified some of your concerns, base, by doing this meaningless impeachment of a cabinet official.
Let me pull this story. This is the Wall Street Journal. Ladies and gentlemen, in the wee hours of the morning pre-dawn, the Senate passed the $95 billion Ukraine-Israel aid package, sending it to the House in, the way I described it early in the morning is that while we were sleeping, the Senate took a blade and pressed it firmly against the back of the American people and then just applied pressure. But I think it's unfair because that would imply the Senate was on your side at any point. So I guess the easier way to explain it is you were walking down a peaceful street with flowers abound when a member of the Senate showed up and said, I'm going to take all your money and give it to Ukraine, and then pulled the knife out. So it wasn't that you were being betrayed. It's that they were stealing from you in plain view. So here we go. 70-29 marked a victory for proponents of the muscular role for the U.S. in foreign affairs. For the moment, elbowing aside isolationist forces in Congress. I love isolationist, they say. Let me tell you guys, I'm not an isolationist. I think we should spend as much money as we can, every single penny that we can, on every country on the planet. Every single one. You name a country, bang, money. Just make it rain. And what I said was all the money we can. And all the money we can is all the money we have left over after our roads are fixed, our schools are fixed or abolished, our borders are secure, healthcare is solved, the working class have places to live. Maybe once we solve all those problems, we can then say, we're so wealthy, let's donate somewhere else.
With fiat, we can print infinite. That's the problem. There will never be, all we can always be more in the stupid system we've got set up.
And I hear what you're saying, and that's 70, I would say 75% correct, but I would add, when they mass print money, or when they issue loans, creating money upon the issuance of debt, they are stripping the buying power of Americans. When you have an insecure border where people are flooding across and they're providing debit cards and they're using taxpayer dollars to facilitate these people into big cities, suppressing the labor market, you are creating economic conditions where there is extremely limited supply with tremendous demand, making housing unaffordable for the average person, especially the younger voters, which is no surprise why they're leaning towards Donald Trump. When they say we're going to create, however they end up doing this, right? People need to understand that they don't take your tax dollars to fund war. They create money upon the issuance of debt. So they create a debt, spend the money, and that means these corporations and say Ukraine, where the money is spent in the creation of weapons, paying personnel and PMCs, that gets spent back in the United States, and this suppresses the buying power of the average American citizen, drives prices up. You combine that with a porous southern border, and it is almost like they are intentionally destroying this country. I hope Gen Z wakes up fast enough to realize it, to do something about it come November.
One of those amazing parts of this bill is that in the Israel section, it actually goes out of its way to specifically exempt the appropriations to Israel from congressional oversight. It specifically allows the Secretary of State, when he approves some of these transmissions of armaments and stuff, to simply bypass ordinary congressional notification requirements. Say what you will about Ukraine funding. I've been a huge skeptic and critic of it from the beginning, but they actually have been coerced into at least nominally implementing some oversight mechanisms like an inspector general and other IGs that have been part of this consortium to at least do some oversight of the funding. But with Israel, Congress just falls over itself to say, do what you want with this money. We're not even going to check anything. It's actually pretty amazing. The total vote count on this bill, 70-29, actually undercounts the extent to which there is a consensus on this issue, meaning a consensus behind just a never-ending disbursement of these war expenditures into conflict zones, Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, because you had at least a couple of Republican senators who are some of the most ardent interventionists in the entire Senate, like Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, Rick Scott, Tim Scott. They voted actually no, not because they oppose the underlying substance of the bill. They're all staunch supporters of funding Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. They probably even wanted more of it, frankly, if they had their way. It's because they're still making a political point or a procedural point about the lack of prioritization of the southern border aspect. But in voting no, you'll notice it didn't actually hinder passage of the bill. So it's a perfect situation for them politically. They can technically register their supposed discontent with the passage of the bill absent some border provision, but their preferred policy still gets put into place anyway.
Do you think they take turns doing that? Like they're like, this time I'm going to vote no. Let's just make sure it gets passed. I'm going to say no on this one. Though next time you get to say no, I'll make sure it gets passed. That way we both look like a good
For
guy.
sure, do.
Yeah, they definitely do that.
Yeah, they have. That's what their conference is about. It's to coordinate and structure their voting patterns. Like, so if somebody needs for political reasons to vote no, even if they support the underlying policy, they can ensure that there's like a trade-off where somebody's voting yes for it, so it's like canceled out and it's going to pass anyway. Because those people I all mentioned, they all firmly were in favor of this bill passing on a substantive level. They just felt they had to make an ancillary point.
Is that the bill and the votes for it?
Yeah, this is the vote total if you want to see it.
Yeah, how can I pull that up? I want to pull up the source.
I tweeted it earlier, so you can look at my account or I'll send it to you.
I will pull up your Twitter.
Yeah, it's
how long ago did you tweet it?
It's from 1:15 p.m. today.
1:15 p.m. today. Let's pull up this. Okay, here we go. This is it right here.
Yeah.
So these are the yays.
Oh no, sorry.
No, this is a different
that's an
one.
older one. That's an older one. Go to 1:15. That was me replying to somebody and
1:15?
proving them embarrassingly wrong because I pulled up one from 2022. Keep going down. Keep
Going down?
Keep going down. Yeah. Keep going there.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. This is Michael Tracey tweeting, the huge Ukraine-Israel bill got 70 votes, which they can hardly ever get for anything, and several voting nay are huge interventionists who only voted nay for political reasons. Yeah, so this is a really good point.
Knowing it wouldn't impede passage. That's
right.
the key point.
So some people are pointing out, too, because I think it was...
like Lindsey Graham didn't have an epiphany and now opposes funding Ukraine.
It was Mullen, I think, who had been reported, and I could be wrong, but I saw a report that he had been discussing a discharge resolution.
I looked into that. I'm not sure how well sourced that was. That seemed like a rumor. I mean, it's possible, but he actually voted no on the final bill.
He voted no, and a lot of people are saying that voting no was the right move, but he's being accused, and again, this may be unwarranted, of only voting no because he knew it passed, and so he'd score political points by claiming he opposed it when he really was.
That might be true, because he did vote aye or yay on a procedural vote like a day or two ago that led to this final vote early this morning.
So just insidious. I mean, it's why we vote as citizens in one day, so we don't know what the vote tally is when we go in there. We're not supposed to know ahead of time. If I can get 700 more votes, my guy will get it over the edge. You just go and you vote for what you believe.
That's the idea. Yeah.
I don't think that's ever been the case, though. I think, practice versus theory.
So Steve Daines from Montana.
Was that a no or yeah?
Votes. It was a nay vote. So he's the chair of the Senate Republican Campaign Committee, which is basically the campaign apparatus for the Senate Republicans. So he's very involved in the political maneuverings around individual states' Senate races. And he was justifying his no vote on the basis of wanting to ensure that Republicans who are running in contested Senate seats this year can still say that they're against the bill in principle because it didn't do the border component. So he was outlining the political rationale, and it's the same for like a Tim Scott. I mean, Tim Scott ran for president, right, from South Carolina, and go back and look at some of the debates. He would give these fulsome declarations in favor of. Oh, there's a roach in front of me.
No, that's a stink bug.
Okay, stink bug. Either way.
Yeah.
Big difference.
I'll chill out.
The marmorated stink bug.
No, it's a big difference.
Whenever I go anywhere, I'm just surrounded by stink bugs. Maybe I have to look inward to see the reason for that. No, that's not true.
So I want to clarify something though.
But so
Tim Scott would give these like soaring oratories in favor of Ukraine funding and Israel funding, et cetera. But now he's voting no. Why? Because he and several others of these people who voted no are like a bridge to Trump within the Senate Republican caucus. Trump is at least nominally opposed to the bill. And so they're kind of trying to, play this game where they're weighing different political considerations and trying to come to a happy medium that is most to the advantage of Senate Republican candidates in November.
I want to clarify something too, because we have a super chat from Brett Tesdall. He says, keep in mind the Senate bill contains a provision that should Trump be elected president and he attempts to stop spending the money on Ukraine, it'll trigger immediate impeachment of Trump. That is not correct.
That's not true.
What JD Vance was saying is that the bill funds Ukraine into the Trump administration, into the first fiscal year of a Trump administration. And should Trump try to stop the funding in negotiations to end the war, it would warrant or give Democrats a reason to impeach. That is, the funding goes until September, I think, 25th. Imagine Donald Trump gets elected, and in February he says, we're ending this war now. Now, I made the prediction that and it's not necessarily a prediction, but more of like a point, that the day the news comes in, Donald Trump will be your next president, he is president-elect, the war stops. There's immediate ceasefire because Ukraine knows their funding's done, and Russia knows Trump is going to negotiate, and it's going to clean everything up, and Putin's not going to want to go up against Trump on the issue. Trump would get on the phone as soon as he's president and say, we're ending this. What needs to be done? Ukraine would lose territory. Russia would end up effectively winning what they wanted, but it would end the war. I think with this bill that nullifies that pseudo prediction, because now funding is secured through September. And if Donald Trump stops the spending that was congressionally approved, they will argue, as they did in the first impeachment, the president has no authority to halt spending that was congressionally approved. But if that means that Donald Trump will not be able to say to Vladimir Putin, the U.S. will no longer fund Ukraine in this conflict. We want an end to the war. Putin will say, you have no authority. Congress has already approved the funding and you can't stop it. They'll impeach you. I saw what happened. It is completely undermining our ability to negotiate in regards to this.
Could they still fund Ukraine in sort of a reconstructive effort with that money and still end the war and still send the bills?
Well, that funding mechanism is one of several that's used to arm Ukraine. So that one that you're talking about pre-existed the 2022 invasion, and as you mentioned, was in effect when Trump was in office.
Right.
So Trump or any president would be in a sense bound by whatever Congress decides to appropriate to that particular authority. But that's only a minority of the overall Ukraine funding, which uses a variety of different authorities. There's definitely no automatic impeachment trigger. And I'm not sure how much it would really hamstring Trump, because I doubt that even if there was some ideal negotiation that he came up with, that it would involve 100% cutting off all funding to Ukraine. I mean, you would probably want to still keep Ukraine within the American orbit. You're still basically subsidizing their entire military.
Right.
Trump has never on principle come out against all Ukraine funding. He actually increased funding.
He gave him weapons.
Yeah, he acceded to the lobbying of Lindsey Graham and John McCain in 2017 and of Poroshenko, the previous president of Ukraine, and started for the first time sending Javelin missiles. And then when the war started in 2022, Trump would go on like Sean Hannity's show and brag how many of his Javelin missiles were being used to kill Russian soldiers. So this idea that Trump is just going to, magically end the war, I think that's a lot of wishful thinking. He won't give any specifics about what he's actually going to do on a policy level. All he says is, the war never would have started if I was in power, which is unprovable, counterfactual. And number two, the war will end in 24 hours because I'll just get everybody to agree and start loving each other. I don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily a realistic proposition.
I don't agree with counterfactual. I suppose you can argue we don't necessarily know what.
It's definitionally counterfactual. It's an alternate timeline.
Right. My point is the crisis in Ukraine had been bubbling up under Obama.
And under Trump.
The ousting of Yanukovych, but it ended.
No, not at all.
So so in 2013, Euromaidan protests erupt. The conflict between the trade agreement with Ukraine, either EU or the loss of the trade agreement with Russia, the ultimate ousting in 2014 of Yanukovych, and the riots and separatist movement. Yeah. By the time Trump had become president and I returned to Ukraine, going back to Kiev, it had simmered down to the point where the locals said, we don't call this civil war. No, it's mostly done. There's just some fighting in the east now.
Yeah.
So under Obama, dramatic escalation, civil war, to the point where journalists were kidnapped by Russian separatist forces. 2 years later, Trump is president. I go back to Kiev. Everything seems to be fine now. We don't really talk about it because it's over. This is what I'm told by locals.
Because there was low-grade fighting in the Donbass still.
But it mostly weakened. In 2014, it was terrifying.
But Trump fueled the combat by sending lethal weaponry for the first time.
And for whatever reason.
I mean, that was denounced by the Kremlin when it happened. And they said that it was going to make it more likely to precipitate war, which they was correct.
And they waited until Trump was out of office. And then under Biden, we get this massive explosion of war and conflict, a resurgence of troops in the Middle East. I do not think, I think it is fair to say that if you look at the actions of the Trump administration in terms of no new wars, timelines for removal of troops from the Middle East, trying to get our troops out of Syria despite being lied to, and Abraham Accords, as well as other attempts at peace negotiations, the likelihood, be it 51% or otherwise, is that there would likely not be war in Ukraine if Donald Trump was president.
He also did give an indication of what he would do when he spoke to Maria Bartiromo in July. And he said, you could say that this is vague, which it is, but he said, I would tell Zelensky no more. You got to make a deal. I would tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give them a lot. We're going to give them more than ever we got.
Right, so he threatened to give Ukraine more weaponry than ever before.
Right. So what he said was that he would stop all funding to Ukraine if Ukraine didn't make a deal and increase it if Russia wouldn't come to the table.
Which is just basically saying he's going to negotiate with them.
But that was his plan. That's the most
I
that
think,
he has said.
But
about his
there really is
plan.
huge continuity, and I've done pretty in-depth research reporting on this. There is a huge amount of continuity between the Trump administration and the Biden administration in terms of Ukraine policy in particular. Not on every foreign policy issue. We can get into that if you want separately. But in terms of Ukraine policy, there's a huge amount of continuity. I'll just give you one very important example. In early 2020, Mike Pompeo, who was then the Secretary of State in the Trump administration, went to Ukraine, met with Zelensky and Ukrainian leadership, and they agreed upon what was the initial iteration of this new strategic partnership that was going to become operational bilaterally between the U.S. and Ukraine. So they were going to start a new there were going to be new parameters to the relationship where it was going to be enhanced bilateral military ties and support and provision of technology and arms and so forth. So it's basically increasing the extent to which Ukraine was becoming a bastion of U.S. military power. That was Pompeo. And then in November 2021, three or so months before the war started in February, the following February, Blinken, Pompeo's successor as Secretary of State, also goes to Ukraine and codifies that strategic partnership agreement, which, among other things, locks in a U.S. commitment that Ukraine will ultimately formally join NATO. So that was reiterated by Pompeo in 2020, reiterated by Blinken in 2021, and that's a core grievance of Putin in launching the invasion. A lot of it occurred under the Trump administration.
Perhaps Tucker should have asked Vladimir Putin specifically on the issue of Trump and Biden. But we'll move on to this story here because I want to cover this one. From Savannah Morning News, Georgia National Guard to send members to U.S.-Mexico border, Brian Kemp announces. Between 15 and 20 members of the Georgia National Guard will travel to the U.S.-Mexico border this spring to assist Border Patrol agents in Texas, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp announced on Tuesday. They will join the 29 members of the Georgia National Guard who are currently stationed in Texas to help set up a command post at the border. Kemp's announcement comes in response to what Republican lawmakers in both chambers of the Georgia legislature are calling a national immigration crisis. Kemp's announcement was delivered shortly after resolutions decrying federal immigration policies and pledging support for Texas Governor Greg Abbott passed in the House and Senate. Georgia's more than 800 miles, blah, blah, blah. No one can claim there isn't a crisis. Federal crime data indicates, yada, yada, yada. Here's the question right now. They say, though the Georgia National Guard members will be traveling to Texas, Kemp said they will mainly be assisting with engineering and mechanical issues at the command center. Our National Guard is not going to be arresting people. We don't have those powers. We'll leave that up to the Texas authorities. So this is the interesting thing. They're going to be assisting Border Patrol agents. Okay, federal Border Patrol agents, because they're facilitating the human trafficking and smuggling. It sounds like what this actually is not too dissimilar to what we saw with Alaska. Georgia, Kemp is not a Trump guy, is going to be sending National Guard to help the federal government facilitate illegal immigration.
Trump endorsed a primary opponent to Kemp in 2022. Yeah. Who didn't win. But
is this unclear whether they're going to assist the feds or the local state?
The story says they'll be assisting Border Patrol. Border Patrol are the ones facilitating the human smuggling. Texas National Guard are stopping it. So, for instance, Taylor Hansen, who has been on this show and reports for Tenet Media, said down there during CBP control, thousands of illegal immigrants, criminal aliens every day. As soon as Texas takes over, 4 to 6. And I said, 1,000? He goes, no, like 4 people. I was like, wait, single digit 4? He's like, yeah. If they're going down to assist the federal government.
That's not what he said. Kemp said the crisis on the border is a national problem and it demands a national solution. But if the Biden administration continues to fail the American people, then we have no choice but to step in. Therefore, in addition to the Georgia Guardsmen already stationed at the border, we will send reinforcements to Texas this spring who will assist with the construction of a forward command post on the border with Mexico.
The question is, this is from Savannah Morning News, and I think what you just said still does not make it clear. We need to know exactly who he will be working with, Texas or the feds. This says Border Patrol. This does not say Texas National Guard. He says arresting will be up to Texas. So my issue here is we don't exactly know based on this individual report, unless we can find more details specifically on what Kemp is saying. To me, it's vague.
Well, he acknowledges Texas's right to make arrests. So there's that.
Yes, but this could just be like, oh yeah, we support Texas and Abbott, and then he goes and he works with the feds to try and keep things simmered down.
Tough to tell. We got to get Kemp on the show.
The report says supporting Border Patrol agents.
Wouldn't any bi-state pact or agreement between, in this case, Georgia and Texas, also probably necessarily include some federal component in that it would become an interstate enterprise and therefore some kind of federal jurisdictional authority kicks in? I don't know the specifics, but that would be my intuition as to what this would entail.
Fox Atlanta is reporting that he is assisting Abbott's effort to control illegal crossings on the U.S.-Mexico border as Abbott pursues a showdown with the Biden administration. So again, allocate resources and assistance to the protection of the southern border does not actually explain who they will be working with. Now, to be fair, Kemp was one of 13 governors who joined Abbott at Eagle Pass. So I honestly have no idea. I have no idea. This is what happened when the Alaska announcement came out that at some point in 2025, Alaskan National Guard would be deployed to assist the federal authorities here. A lot of people immediately saw that and assumed this meant Alaska would be deploying National Guard to help Texas at a state level. However, when you read further, it's no, to assist the federal government, and people were like, that is not very based. So the question now is, which command will these individuals fall under? Will it be to act? What we know right now, the Biden administration Border Patrol wants to open the border and allow thousands of criminal aliens in every day. The Texas state government has made this illegal and wants razor wire blocking these individuals and will not allow CBP in. Who is Brian Kemp going to be assisting in this? We don't know. It's conflicting reporting.
Yeah, I'd like.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument. I mean, I've heard the argument made that any law enforcement activity that takes place in conjunction with the border is necessarily within the purview of the federal government because it's a national border and it transcends state jurisdiction. So that could be what people are referring to.
And so the issue now is when Texas National Guard came in and secured the area, the argument from the feds was you do not have the authority to do this. Right. They did it anyway. Is Kemp which side is he on? There's a showdown. I mean, it's a legal showdown.
I think you're right. It's conflicting reports because most of what we've been seeing is helping Texas Guard at the border. That's mostly
maybe they just inadvertently called them Border Patrol.
But this is assumptive language.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It is intentionally vague language
and they're
to
not
make someone
heading out for like a month or
reporting.
So. Yeah.
The other thing is,
which is possible.
Every ambitious Republican governor, or maybe even some non-ambitious ones, end up sending a contingent of whether it's state police or National Guard to Texas or something to engage in certain border enforcement activities. Does it make that much of a difference ultimately? I mean, I guess nice headlines out of it.
Well, so
if they have an inconvenient Republican primary challenge or something, maybe it kind of fortifies their position. But I don't see what impact it makes.
We have a quote from Kemp saying their contributions will be outlined by the official request made by the Texas Guard to our own Guard and director, James Stallings at Gemma.
That clears it up.
That clears it up a lot. So this does sound like Kemp is reinforcing Abbott's position against Joe Biden.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, I mean, I think clearly it's an attempt to have a bi-state arrangement with Texas because they see themselves as an opposition to the national government, at least on this policy.
So what does that mean then? We now have several states, I believe 10 states have sent law enforcement, National Guard and law enforcement to Texas to secure the border in defiance of the federal government.
Mm-hmm. And we had Trump saying, everyone who can, go ahead and do it.
That was crazy.
That was wild.
Donald Trump said anyone who could should do it. And now Kemp is on board.
Well, how much in defiance is it really just by dispatching these groups of
National Guard?
I mean,
Texas
they're not actively opposing. I mean, they're trying to engage in enforcement activity. They're not proactively like blunting the influence of the federal government. I mean, you could say it's like a political statement against the current federal government policy, but it's not like actively opposing the authority of the federal government.
What do you mean?
When you say
so like the Texas National Guard is, according to the Biden administration, in violation of federal law.
Right.
So if like Greg Abbott were to rob a bank and Kemp said, I'm going to send some guys to help you, you'd be like, well, he's not actually working against the government. I mean, what's he really doing but going into a bank?
We don't know that the Georgia National Guard are going to be engaging in activities related to border enforcement that the Biden administration says are illegal. I mean, there could be other activities they could engage in that the Biden administration hasn't said that about. Right?
I think the way that I would put it simply is, if a person is robbing a bank and you do anything to help them, like even bring them a cheeseburger, you're an accomplice.
So if you do anything to help the Texas National Guard at all,
well, that's assuming that what they're doing
like
is
hand
illegal.
out water bottles or something.
Well, yeah,
the federal. I don't think
support.
I don't think the federal government has the authority to allow 8,000 illegal economic migrants in every day. They
Criminal
don't have,
aliens.
Yeah, why would they have that authority to allow that? That doesn't make any sense. Why would they have the authority to allow our country's military to surrender to an incompetent force? They don't have that kind of authority. You strip them of command if they're trying to ruin us.
If the argument is that Texas does not have the authority to remove CBP from an international border and they're violating federal jurisdiction, the only real issue is, like, we have a national level conflict of law enforcement in a way we've not seen in a very, very long time. You know, a lot of people like to bring up the Bundy Ranch stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but that was private citizens versus a federal agency.
Yeah, that's totally
We're
different.
looking at state National Guard armed troops who have been deployed with weapons to repel Border Patrol agents from the border and to place border barriers in front of what the feds are declaring as their jurisdiction. And now you have Kemp announcing the deployment of 15 to 20 troops to assist Texas in this effort. What do you think would happen if you, Michael, went up to a federal law enforcement agent, say FBI, and told them, get away from this border right now or else, with guns? Like, you and your buddies got guns, walked up and said, all of you FBI guys have to leave now or else. I think you would be violently arrested and you'd go to jail for a long time.
Oh, I think I'd have a very friendly encounter with the nice agent and everything would work out fine.
The only reason that's not the case right now is the dramatic escalation that would ensue should federal, I mean, we'll slow down. To anybody listening, if a group of militiamen, like just like a bunch of locals who called themselves the border guys or whatever, showed up to the border and started putting up razor wire, told CBP to get the F out, their jurisdiction no longer applies, some wild ish would go down.
It really depends on the situation, because like if you had a burning city and people were burning to death and the militia guys went in, they're like, we're going to help all these people survive. But the feds were there being like, no, you can't go in there. And they're like, get out of my way. We're saving these people. And they did it. That would be like, the feds might back off in that case and be like, all right. There's more of you. You do need to save them morally.
Let's clarify. Your city is burning down and the feds are setting the fires. And a bunch of militia guys come in and say, we're shutting this down.
Yeah, I would think maybe the command is giving the feds weird orders, but the men themselves would be like, this is what we're doing here is unreasonable. There's more of them than there are of us. And they're righteous right now, so let's back off. Like
I'm pretty sure if non-law enforcement citizens of Texas showed up with guns and tried repelling federal agents, you would have bloodshed and violent arrests, and it would be like a J6 national news story.
I guess my instinct is that Brian Kemp is a pretty milquetoast Republican, middle of the road, not rocking the boat that much. As you mentioned, opponent of Trump, or Trump opposes him and tried to get him primaried actually in 2022 based on 2020 election administration stuff. So I'm a little bit doubtful that Kemp would take such, adventurous action to really engage in any kind of open defiance of the federal government. You expect that more of a different kind of cavalier Republican, potentially, other than Kemp. And Kemp's just like a business-oriented Chamber of Commerce Republican.
Unless you're taking a look at the polls, you're taking a look at national sentiment, and you realize Biden's on the wrong side of history.
Has there been illegal immigrants being shipped into Georgia, into Atlanta?
I would imagine yes. They're going everywhere.
That'll change a governor's mind.
But
the Biden administration is flying people everywhere.
Right. Now, so I look at it this way. If someone in government does a bad thing and everyone says it was a bad thing, you will immediately start seeing politicians come out and being like, I was always opposed to bad thing.
Right.
It's just it's the tides. It's the whims of public discourse. If Kemp is seeing that national polling favors securing the border, the Biden administration is grossly unpopular, Trump is the front runner to win with the polls, even among the youth vote, he might be thinking to himself, I don't want to be on the wrong side of history. I better just go along with this. Doesn't matter what.
That's what I think he's doing. He's going along to get along. He's sending a nominal contingent of Georgia personnel to assist in border activity, and I doubt it'll be anything that really crosses the line into open conflict or warfare between the states and feds. Because at that point, you might potentially alienate some of those more, median voters who do agree about the border issue at this point, but don't necessarily want to be too crazy about it.
With this, now that we've cleared this up and it does appear clearly that he is going to be working directly with the Texas Guard in defiance of the federal government, I think when you look at the polls, when you look at the national sentiment, if the Biden administration made any move to defy Texas in terms of force, they would get crushed instantly. You know, like we mentioned, Jon Stewart ragging on Joe Biden's brain. It's not a popular administration. They are, I mean, one poll just came out showing a national election. I think Biden was at like 38%. Mm-hmm. This is not including RFK Jr. Trump was at like high 40s to like Biden's 38. And I don't know how true that is.
Governor Brian Kemp
we
made
love.
the announcement.
I would like to add real quick.
Biden's approval is the lowest of any president since the second term of George W. Bush, when it was at a historic low and Iraq was the most unpopular.
I'd also like to take this time to point out the worst websites in the world are local news websites because they automatically reload to generate ad revenue.
Everything's playing, by the way, guys.
Yeah, but anyway,
local news reporters are also among the dumbest people I've ever encountered. Like, I'm sure they're well-meaning, but they just like take PR and marketing in college.
Yeah.
And then they can read off a teleprompter and they have no original thought about anything.
Well, it was fascinating, too, because I knew someone a long time ago who wanted to be a broadcast journalist. And I was like, so you want to stand there and read copy? Like, you're not, it's the most brain dead job imaginable. Like,
with weird vocal intonations, like, tonight on such and such and such, I have to talk like I'm a crazy, abnormal person and not communicate with you regularly.
I once asked, it was a kid in college that I knew, and they were like, I want to be a broadcast journalist. And I said, why is it that you talk like this? Tonight, we saw a dog run across the street, Jim. And I'm like, why do you talk like that? And they're like, we're trained to. And I'm like, why?
Yeah, they teach it.
Why?
They
nobody
teach
talks
standard
like that.
American speech.
Yeah,
They
but
teach it.
it's not standard American speech. It's like news broadcast dialect. It's a specific thing where
it's like cartoonish speech.
A dog was seen running across the street.
If you met somebody at like a cafe who was talking like that, you would think that they're out of their minds.
Is it like,
actually, Howard Stern became popular because on the radio, he mocked the radio version of that theatrical style of intonation and just sounded like a normal person, more or less. So he was kind of, going against the grain. And I think, people who are our age now, I mean, the only people who watch these local news stations are like petrified 65-year-olds who don't know how to fully work the TV remote. So this is all they can come up with at like 6:30 in the evening.
You said it there. It's theatrical. That's the problem with this vocal intonation is they're talking with great enunciation, and the tone also is a form of enunciation. So you can hear like from a distance in a theater, you can discern what they're saying and when their emotions are changing, even if you're like 7,000 feet away. But on TV, it doesn't translate.
The fact that I'm talking like this sounds like it gives me non-existent journalistic authority. Back to you, Ken.
Maybe it's from radio.
Like from back in the
This
day.
show is weird now.
This show?
This show is
Everyone's
weird, though.
talking like this.
I think it's like an attempt at making yourself seem authoritative by speaking in a way that people associate with, if you talk that way, you're official.
Also, it's heightened. True. Like a lot, whenever people do performances are heightened. That's what you do. Like you go on stage and you speak, carefully and with specific intonation. That's always what you do when you give a presentation.
I got to be honest. Like, could you imagine turning on like your local news station and the guy's like, I'm standing here at the corner of 47th and Cicero. A man earlier had crossed the street and a car hit him.
It said a man earlier had crossed the street.
I would watch that.
In college, I did I did journalism for TV2 at Kent State, and I was like the special reporter I got hired on. And they're like, all right, we want to move you to sports. And I was like, all right. So I was that guy. I'd be like, he hit it. It went out to the left field. That guy got it, and dang, he threw it far.
You're just sports guy.
The guy went over to third base, too. I didn't know who they were.
How many people were tuning into Kent State sports?
I didn't get the analytics. I'd love to know, though.
Dude, that's great.
Yeah.
They're saying,
I was like,
they're saying
normal.
the Super Bowl was the most watched thing on television.
Did you guys watch it?
Since the moon landing.
I thought it was ever.
Since
I thought it was the
the
most
moon
watched
landing,
broadcast
but-
ever.
Since the moon landing, they said.
That's crazy.
Yeah, 123 million.
I actually did watch the Super Bowl with my child who was sick.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, I want to watch the ads, Mom."
And the narrative.
Well, did you guys see the ending? The ending was kind of cool.
It was exactly as we all predicted.
Did you see Joe Biden's meme that came out right away?
Of course,
all part of the plan.
But what I love the most about it is that we predicted with like 80% accuracy exactly what was going to happen. The 49ers would be up in the first half. The Chiefs would slowly get ahead, but then the 49ers would push ahead. It would end up a really close game. And then finally in the last second, with the 49ers ahead, the Chiefs would turn it around, and that's literally what
They let
happened.
the
They went
guy
overtime.
score the touchdown.
But
Just
no,
kidding.
no,
Kelsey
it wasn't
didn't.
Kelsey.
Kelsey didn't get the game-winning
not
touchdown,
Kelsey.
which
He
they
almost did.
which they engineered just so it's not 2 on the nose.
No. The second to last play, they did get it to Kelsey.
Kelsey got a big play toward the end, but he didn't get the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah,
and they
it would've been
stopped
too
him
obvious.
just before the touchdown, and then it went to Hardman, who ended up scoring. But let's
I
jump to the
took
story.
that. I took that Biden meme photo with the
Yeah.
laser eyes, and I
Best-
tweeted out saying, "This is what every Palestinian child sees as their last thing that they see before they're blown up with a U.S. munition."
Jeez.
Yeah, someone was like
let's jump to
during the
this-
Haifa, blowing up Haifa. Didn't they blow up Haifa that
Rafah,
night?
yeah.
Rafah.
crossing, yeah.
They were
Right
bombing
while
Rafah.
everyone was watching
Which
the Super
is the
Bowl, they're
one
bombing
place
hell
in
out
the
of
far
city.
south
They
of Gaza
bombed
where they
Rafah,
had
the crossing.
well the city
Oh,
Rafah.
okay.
That's the one place in the far south of Gaza where they had told
That's where they told they were
Palestinians
gonna go,
all this
yeah.
time to go to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Now they're bombing that place. There's really no place left now.
Well, they had hostages there.
Right.
Let's jump to this story. This is tweets, a story from NBC Boston. Jack Posobiec highlighting the rich white woman in New England who took in a family of Haitian migrants who says, "It's great. It's like having your own personal chef." So let me play some of this story for you.
Hi, Lisa.
She says her daughter is very happy. When she wakes up in the morning, she says, "Hi, Lisa," and everyone starts the day smiling.
It's a delight. And it's really fun having them. What I realized is there's so much prejudice against refugees, mostly because people don't know them.
Lisa says she feels like she has her own personal chef, as Wildande loves cooking.
¿Te gusta la ocupación?
Sí.
In fact, her goal is to open up her own restaurant.
Quiero tener mi propio restaurante.
All right. So the basic narrative here is a wealthy white woman with extra space took in a family of Haitian migrants where they cook for her,
That's
and it makes
correct.
them happy, and she does not pay them.
I was writing about this today because it really seems like we used to have a word for things like this, when rich white people would open their homes and give you their extra space and not pay you anything, and then have you do the household chores.
Well, but let's be realistic.
Indentured
Libby,
servitude, I think.
no,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
a bit worse than that.
And
How about
then
like an au pair?
when I wrote about it
let's
today,
be
I wrote
real.
about it today, and I did
No,
use
look,
the S word.
You're making
I did
an
for
allusion to
sure.
slavery.
Yes, that's
But
correct.
these Haitian migrants came here by choice.
And they can leave anytime they
leave
want.
They can go anywhere. They can leave, and there is a perfectly fine dumpster they can sleep in if they want.
The thing-
Or they can choose to live in the rich white lady's home and have shelter for their family, so long as they keep, giving exchange of their services.
Right. Well,
Don't
that's
au pairs come from like Sweden and stuff in exchange for room and board and then taking care
They
of
get
the
paid.
children?
They get paid, and they have special
In every
immigration
case?
status.
Yes. So a few friends of mine 20 years ago were au pairs, and it's a program. You get paid. Okay. You are a live-in housekeeper who receives a salary or wage, usually a salary.
Stipend or something.
And then you have a special visa.
My friends who did it got a weekly flat rate. So you can call it a stipend, but they're getting $500 a week plus a room in the house, and they just watch the kid and prepare meals for the kid.
Taxable,
And
500
so-
taxable. All
Oh,
taxable,
yeah. And but they were like 19.
Probably double taxable because if you're from your home country.
Oh,
so
right.
Sweden's got like, 55% income tax.
But then I also met the inverse too. People who had came to the United States to be au pairs.
That's what I
And-
meant. People
right.
who come from like Scandinavia to
Yeah,
the
both.
US. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a job.
Yeah.
You could also do like teaching English and Korean and stuff like that.
Yeah.
This isn't a job. This is
No,
here's-
these are people who came here
here's
illegally.
a place to live.
I think this woman, she should be in prison.
Yeah, well, it's not just her. I was writing about this for Human Events today. I did an op-ed and I started digging into what's going on in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts in August, you had the lieutenant governor telling Massachusetts, Bay Staters is what they're called pretty much. You had her telling everybody to open up their homes and let everybody in. They have a vast network of not-for-profits and NGOs that facilitate housing people in the homes of, residents. And working out whatever sort of arrangements. But you have to imagine that if you're like, essentially homeless in a foreign country and you're in somebody's house, you're going to do whatever you can to try and make it less,
I think
less of a burden for that person.
I
You're
think-
going to like do whatever the chores are.
the only future I see for this country will have a very dark period in it because there's one of two things that can happen. Donald Trump engages in a mass deportation program, which sparks insanity among the left, or the continued erosion of the American community, which results in this country eventually just breaking apart into a million pieces. And I'll explain what that means. The analogy I would give is, you live in a house with a roommate, and one day there's a guy sleeping on your couch, and you go to your roommate and say, "Who is this guy sleeping on the couch?" And he says, "This is Jim." Jim needs a place to stay. Come on, just let him stay. And you say, no, I never agreed to pay rent to let him stay. No, it's fine. Like he'll help pitch and he'll clean things up. And you go, okay, fine, whatever. The next day, there's another guy sitting on the couch and his name is Bill. And you go, who's Bill? I never said Bill could come in. And they go, me and Jim vote that he can stay. And you go, no, he can't vote. Well, we both voted. So now you can't do anything about it. 2-1, he gets to stay. Now it's 3-1. One by one, they keep voting to add more and more people. And eventually you're just some dude who's living in the basement in your own filth because they keep voting against you to take all your stuff. So what's happening now is
I keep wondering, like,
the New York election with to replace Santos. I saw this is very fascinating.
The polls closed, by the way.
Right. The Republican who's running in New York is basically a liberal.
She's the most hilarious person the Republicans have ever nominated for any office.
Mazzy
And so-
Yeah,
So-
she's a black Ethiopian woman from served in the IDF. That's why the Nassau County Republicans in New York are all head over heels.
So
for her.
here's what's happening. The Republicans, instead of choosing somebody who says we should secure our borders, we should deport, MAGA, Trump, America first, they get someone in New York who's a liberal. Why?
Well, she supports Trump. She expressed support for Trump.
Sure. But I mean, she's a relatively liberal person. It's a New York Republican. You're not getting a diehard MAGA. What happens is when Reagan, many people attribute California's turning from red to blue to Reagan.
Well, Santos actually was pretty right way. I mean, Santos boasted that he had the most conservative record of any Republican in the House.
Well, and he was also weird and strange in other ways. But my point is, in California in 94, there was an attempt to pass a resolution that said, they did pass it, federal public funds cannot be given to non-citizens. And it caused massive revolt and protests among the left, who were amplified by illegal immigrants, creating such crisis in the state that a bunch of Republicans backed down, Democrats gained a majority and ended up winning. Simply put, when you bring someone into your country to live there and they bring their family and they expand and you end up with 10 plus million, they will exert influence on your country. Over a long enough period of time, they're not going to vote for your country. They're going to vote for theirs. One of the big problems we have in this country is remittances. People come to the United States, do work, and then send the money immediately out of the country, which is bad. This is there were a few jurisdictions famous for their local currencies. Ithaca, famous for its hours, they called it. They've mostly fallen out of popular use, but they were very big. I think it was like in the 2000s. This was a local currency created by some dude.
Ithaca, New York?
Ithaca, New York. They still have the Ithaca hour, but most people don't use it anymore. What happens is
it a legal tender?
In the jurisdiction, yes.
Huh, I didn't know that.
So here's what happens. US dollars. I often ask this when I go into any new city or I'm staying somewhere. I say, what brings US dollars into this city? I wonder. Often you'll find it's government or universities, like money has to come from somewhere. In the instance of Michigan, when the auto manufacturing dried up and left, all of a sudden, nothing is generating US dollars into this region. And so there's no way to economically expand. People can't afford the increasing cost of inflation because the state only has, let's say, $1 million, hypothetical number, in circulation with no new dollars coming in. But dollars are going out through import purchases. When you buy a computer from a foreign country, that money goes to that country. Figuratively, it's spent in the United States, but it's utilized by them in their country. That value leaves. Without money coming into an area, it will start to dissolve and fall apart. So local jurisdictions have, they tried to create their own currencies to supplement local trade to prevent the issue of dollars leaving the area.
I think it's no longer in circulation in Ithaca, but it was mimicked in a couple other cities like Madison, Wisconsin.
Not just mimicked, even before the Ithaca hour. But I went there like 8 years ago and people were like, yeah, we have them. We don't really use them anymore. The guy who made it work, like, I guess, I don't know if he died or what happened. But my point is this. People come to the United States, they earn money at a store, and then they send that money to a foreign country. Someone will then use those dollars to buy something not in the United States, not facilitate American trade, not facilitate American services, and it won't go into the hands of young working class individuals, and thus the economy gets depressed by the exporting of cash. You combine that with a mass influx of millions of immigrants who begin exerting pressure against your interests, and your country collapses. Mm-hmm. It is akin to inviting a stranger into your home and then letting him exert authority over how things are spent and who gets money. Over a long enough period of time, it's simply put, the moment you and your roommate invite a third party in, that third party will subvert your interests. Whether it's by just telling your roommate what to do or by actually getting a say for some reason in how things are done. As Democrats have begun the push to allow non-citizens to vote, and they are, Joe Rogan was talking about this like a week ago. New York's trying it, got held up in the courts. Many jurisdictions are doing this. eventually Republicans will have to pander to non-citizens in order to get votes. So in a city like New York, you'll have a Republican say, no, I will not give tax funding from American workers to non-citizens. There will be revolt. There will be people with money and influence in the city who will then oppose that Republican. They will never win. And the end result will be a Republican saying, I'm totally in favor of non-citizens voting, but I'm a Republican who believes in families.
Yeah, non-citizens should never be able to vote in any election in the United States for any reason.
And after this cycle of millions, 10 plus million flooding in, there are going to be jurisdictions where no politician would dare say that because there's going to be a large base of the children of these immigrants and those who do have voting power who will say, if you enact policy that in any way makes it harder for me and my family, we'll vote against you. And you'll say, but your family aren't citizens. And they'll be like, you have to consider them now or else you lose.
And also they're going to be pushing, the Democrats, you can be sure, are going to be trying to push in some sort of amnesty for people. That's going to be coming if they win
I agree.
in the fall.
But I think the important thing to understand is amnesty is not needed at all. For one, they'll be counted in the census.
But they could come at it from multiple directions, right? Like if they can't get amnesty, they'll get this voting thing. If they can't get the voting thing, they'll get the amnesty. Like they're going to push it through one way or another.
Agreed. But it's important for people to understand whether or not an illegal immigrant votes does not matter, and whether or not they get amnesty doesn't matter. What matters is they will be counted towards the census. They will create artificial congressional seats and electoral college votes, and they will exert local pressure, forcing conservatives to say publicly, like, I'm in favor of illegal immigration, because you will not win in a district that has a large percentage of non-citizens. Why? Some 20-year-old kid is like, I'm going to vote this. His friend's going to come to him and say, hey, man, I'm undocumented. My parents brought me here and we're not citizens. If you vote for the Republican, they're going to deport me. And he's going to go, okay, I won't.
Don't you think it's a bit of an overstatement, though, to say that any ethnic bloc that ends up getting a foothold within the American populace will inevitably work against the national interest? I mean, Cuban emigres have been a huge well, you said that they're going to work. You said that they're going to be divergent with popular interest, right?
Non-citizens come.
But they're naturalized Cubans who ended up being admitted to the country.
But it's everybody all together.
Where they were not citizens when they
the issue is integration
and that's some of the most reliable
right. So the thing
Republican voters.
What you're misunderstanding
in Florida.
I'm talking about mass influx, unchecked migration, where you have people who are not citizens and have no interest in what this country is, represents, or its history, versus legal migrants who came here appropriately, assimilated, took a citizenship test, and have family and connections to the country.
But Cubans who came over in a boat didn't go through a standard regulated naturalization process. Right. So you can, that's fair to oppose it. It's been a controversial issue. But the point is they became very well integrated into the wider American ethic, including voting overwhelmingly for Republicans.
And so what you're saying has no bearing on anything I just said, because if people are integrated into the country, they vote for the interests of that country. People who are not integrated vote against the interests of the country.
But they integrated even despite coming illegally.
What does that have to do with what I'm talking about?
That was because there was
You're talking about the lack of integration for people who come illegally.
Because there's so many of it. It's about how many can integrate over a period of time.
Okay, so it could be quantity. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. We're talking about millions of people over the past few years coming in with no ties to the community who are looking for Buffalo Wild Wings. That's an absolute quote from one of the migrants in the migrant caravan. They want Buffalo Wild Wings. They're not coming here because they're like, this country will give me free speech. They're coming here because they're like, I want PlayStation. Quote. That's a quote from the LA Times. They interviewed someone in the migrant caravan. I want Buffalo Wild Wings. That's a quote. The people fleeing.
Or are they basically saying, I want more economic opportunity?
So let's just say there's a big difference between someone fleeing. So there's a big difference between someone fleeing Cuba because they're being murdered or gulagged and someone who's like, we're going to get free stuff.
Yeah, economic migrancy is not refuge. You don't seek refuge for bad economics. It's only for political persecution, things like that.
Well, right. That's why they wanted to raise the asylum standards so the people who are coming for economic refuge would not be eligible anymore.
Yeah, and she called them refugees. They're not. They're migrants. They're economic migrants.
I think
the refugees legally.
Well, these are asylum seekers from Haiti. So
so under current law,
they're asylum seekers.
What are they seeking asylum from?
It's from Haiti, which sucks apparently.
But what sucks in it?
Haiti's Haiti's basically a failed state with it's run by. Wasn't the president assassinated not long ago?
And to be fair, Haiti. I mean, in terms of the bordering nations or closest nations, it's an island. I mean, it's a portion of an island. It's one thing if someone comes from Africa through South America, through Central America, to Mexico, and to the United States. It's another thing if it's Haiti.
Oh yeah, if
So-
they're coming right from Haiti, then I misspeak. Then if they're coming right from Haiti and there's gangs running it and murdering people in the street, then yeah, they are refugees.
But
that's a different situation.
No, that's not necessarily true. Somebody from Haiti isn't necessarily at risk of dying to a gang. Just because your country's bad doesn't mean we just give you stuff.
How do you quantify that? How do you figure it out? Whether they're actually, if they're just taking advantage of political upheaval to go to a better place, or if they're actually fleeing from the upheaval?
Well, like with Venezuela, like there's special immigrant visas for Venezuelans, and the Biden administration directly flies Venezuelans to the U.S. And now there's this whole issue in New York with like Venezuelan gang being connected to like 63 robberies or something like that. And now there's some concern that they might be teaming up with MS-13.
Venezuelans, that's another potentially Republican-leaning ethnic demographic. Because remember, what they're fleeing a left-wing.
But I don't care about Republican-leaning or Democrat-leaning.
No, I'm just saying there's a diversity in terms of the political inclinations of people who come to the country,
and it's not America. And
know.
no, it's fact. So
maybe
I'll
I'm
put it this
sentimental,
way.
but hasn't America always been like a melting pot?
Imagine you have for people who integrate.
I'm descended from people. Well, yeah, I'm descended from people who came from Ireland, Italy, who weren't necessarily thinking.
So let's say,
I just love the concept of America. They were coming for economic opportunity because they were peasants.
And there was a restriction on how many could come and when they could come and what they had to do. And historically, these people came and were like, we're going to learn the language, we're going to go to school. And many of the migrants, stories that actually was recently told by a very elderly person, their parents refused to teach them their native language. They said, you're only going to speak English, which is the opposite of what we're seeing now. So I think a better analogy...
I think a lot of second, third, fourth generation Spanish-speaking immigrants end up speaking English. Because of proximity, not because the parents are like, we're going to integrate. I think a better analogy would be like, if you have 5 members of your family and you invite, and this lady invites someone in the house, that person will begin to exert influence. That person's interests are not going to be the kid going to college. It's going to be, what am I getting? Whether they feel they're entitled to a lot or a little, it will be, what do I get? This woman is cooking and cleaning. Let's just say cooking. I don't know, personal chef. And so she's going to eventually be like, look, I appreciate you letting me stay here, but I'm cooking food for you and I get nothing for it. There will be influence exerted. Let's now entertain the possibility, this woman, what do you think happens if her family of 5 invites 4 more people in? Now it's 50-50. Now there's going to be fighting over who gets to use the bathroom and when. Doesn't matter who's entitled to the bathroom, who owns it. It's going to be a problem. Hey, look, I got to wake up in the morning. You can't be in the shower for 30 minutes. I need to take a shower. Plus, there's 5 people waiting. It becomes cluttered. Eventually, there will be competing interests as to who gets what resources. Imagine they had 5 more Haitian refugees, as they call them. Now they're going to be like, yeah, you get out. We got too many people here. There's 15 of us, and we vote you leave. That's just it. I guess the question is,
is like, when do they get squatters' rights, for her house?
I guess the question is,
she's a resident now.
Yeah.
She can't be evicted.
When are the question might be, when are there finite resources? Meaning, when does the share get smaller and smaller and smaller, that when more people come in, there's too small a piece of the pie that it creates upheaval? Or
also, like, let's
say it happen slowly, or it can happen all at once. If the power goes out, if there's a power down,
it's right now.
A grid down thing, it's every man for themselves.
It's right now, and a carton of eggs is $10. Or a pack of salami. I've been complaining about this nonstop. $15.
$15 for salami.
It's like $13.26. Okay, I'm rounding up, but it was like $6 a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Real.
It's getting nuts, and it's supply and demand. It's spending massive amounts of money and resources through our fractional reserve banking system on a tremendous influx of non-citizens who are being handed debit cards. Our tax dollars, figuratively, being spent to facilitate the trafficking of non-citizens coming through the border. It is not a boon on our economy. I'll put it this way. A viral video from Gen Z of a 5x11 apartment in New York City with no bathroom. It has a sink in it, and it's $2,000 a month. And they're like, this is what Gen Z can afford these days. If you're lucky, they're putting non-citizens in luxury hotels paid for by the state. And you get a TV, a bedroom, and a bathroom.
And
it's
an
a studio
Xbox, too.
And an Xbox. How about that?
Lucky if you get a bathroom. I
No.
had a toilet in my kitchen once.
The
I looked at that apartment.
The luxury hotels have bathrooms.
Oh, that place, yeah.
The Gen Z apartments don't.
No, you got to walk down the hall.
I've never even been to a hotel that has Xbox. What the hell?
Well,
No, the shelters have Xbox.
But the question then becomes, why is
games
it
do they have?
that American citizens who are trying to start families, get jobs, and get places to live on their own have to live in 5x10 boxes, and non-citizens are getting luxury
Because they had
hotel
it easy
rooms?
growing up, Tim. They got a leg up. They can work. They can figure it out on their own. That's the mentality, I think.
This is the point of finite resources today. We do not have enough to give homes to our own children right now. Why the are we giving it to non-citizens?
Well, yeah, the other thing too is you hear the government officials in Toronto and New York and Massachusetts all saying to people, hey, if you have extra rooms, just open your homes to these, immigrants and have them come live with you. It's like, who in Toronto, New York, and Eastern Massachusetts has extra space? Rich people have extra space.
Right. I hope that the next thing we hear from this woman is that she gets into a dispute over residency with the migrants who claim that they're legal residents who can't be evicted. And then, because look, after I think 28 days, you're a legal resident who can't be evicted no matter what. They can then claim she doesn't pay rent. And her argument is going to be, I am a legal resident and our initial agreement included no rent free.
Well, and the NGOs also that facilitate this kind of thing, they're saying, oh, you can decide how long you want these migrants to be there, but not really, not by actual law and not by tenant law in Toronto, New York, or Boston.
She's going to be like, it was really great having you here. I think you guys should find a new place now that you've been here for a long time. And they're going to say, we have nowhere to go and we're not leaving.
Right. Why would they?
Resources have always been finite, but my hunch is that there have been times in American history in the past where economic conditions were worse than they are today, and yet an inflow of immigration was still tolerated. Look, I've never actually been ideologically in favor of immigration or really even opposed to it. Again, neutral for better or worse. But in the encounters that I have had with people who do immigrate, most of the time, if they're coming here, it's for relatively innocuous reasons, not because they have some kind of a nefarious intent to undermine the American project, or even a lot of them do want to actively assimilate. And that doesn't mean that you can't justifiably regulate those inflows of non-citizens to the country. I mean, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Which would be much less than 2 million.
But I wouldn't necessarily cast such kind of generalized aspersion on the people who do make that trek. A lot of times they tend to be more industrious and more entrepreneurial than the average member of their society because they're making this epic journey to come to a brand new place. I think you find that in particular with the people from Central and South America.
Keep saying it, and I hope you do. Yeah. And we can clip this and send it to every Gen Z kid who can't afford an apartment.
No, I get it.
The advocacy of someone to say these industrious people are enriching the community and are going to get for free what you should have gotten.
No, I'm not saying they should get for free what you've gotten. I'm just saying that in terms of their character traits.
They're good people.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's great that they're coming here and taking from you.
The problem is it's tough to tell if they're industrious or not.
And it's not them who's taking it. I mean, they're utilizing the opportunity.
If there are 10 houses on a street and there are 10 young people and you bring in 10 non-citizen criminal immigrants, right, there is going to be a competition for those Gen Z Americans over which house goes to whom.
Maybe the answer is just build more houses.
That is
who's going to do it.
Part of it.
Who's going to do it? Where's the prices of wood and steel have been skyrocketing?
Graphene.
Government could subsidize it.
So the government takes from everyone else to pay for the criminal aliens they allowed in. How about this? We say, hey,
the government used to create a huge amount of public housing. That was like the housing boon after World War II.
Let's stop bringing in millions of non-citizens and actually support the younger generation and allow them to live comfortably and inherit the American
I'm not
dream.
a zealot one way or another on this.
Yeah, I think you can't tell if they're industrious or not. That's the problem. A lot of people are. A lot of people could be covert military, just acting like they're migrants. There's no way to tell. That's why we got to in my opinion, shut down this illegal border crossing.
What are we looking at? Tens of thousands of Chinese nationals?
Possibly.
I don't know. Looking at 600. What is the number? 600 terror suspects or something? Was it 600?
Really?
But why does being a Chinese national automatically make you under suspicion?
They are not refugees from Central or South America coming through our southern border.
But why does being from China make you uniquely suspicious?
Who's
an illegal Chinese migrants are dangerous.
Someone coming from the other side of the planet through our border is not a refugee.
No, that may be true.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that,
they're a criminal alien.
Okay, I just don't think the fact that they're
it doesn't mean that
necessarily makes
it doesn't mean that they're here to destroy us, but it does indicate that they're not.
Which is an argument that's being made. They're saying that the Chinese Communist Party is infiltrating the United States through the southern border by sending all these suspicious nationals.
But we got to stop there because you keep doing this where you're making arguments no one made.
I think that it's
that argument has been widely made. Maybe you didn't make it.
We on this show are pointing out that someone who flew 8,000 miles to Mexico or to Brazil and came through our border is not a refugee or asylum seeker.
No,
they're seeking to exploit a damaged border and steal from the American people.
No, that could be true.
It's a fact.
Yeah,
if you're coming to the southern border,
I don't think it makes them an especially insidious threat like national security.
No, it's the fact that if you came from China, you are clearly not a refugee.
Okay.
But
I got that. I'm talking about
it's not fair to make the claim that the Chinese are more dangerous, but I think that could be possible.
And that claim is widely made. Look at Republicans talking about the permeability of the border in terms of Chinese nationals. They do argue that it's a national security threat to the United States because they're in league with the Chinese Communist Party.
And that the Chinese are sending fentanyl. I've heard that they're sending fentanyl to the cartels.
That's a fact.
Or they're sending the ingredients to make the fentanyl, and so then they're sending fentanyl across the border.
They manufacture the core ingredient.
That's like the poisoning of the American people.
It's more than that. When people order drugs online through nefarious means, it mostly comes from China. So designer drugs, notoriously coming from China. And
I've only ordered from India.
So, there are websites that were around for a little while, and designer drugs were this big thing where
dark web.
Yeah, dark
Silk
web.
Road, was that it?
So I don't know. I don't know exactly where Silk Road. It was like, it could be from anywhere.
Yeah.
But designer drugs is this big thing where I think they've closed the loophole because drugs were specifically regulated. People could could alter the molecular structure of certain drugs, making them a different non-regulated substance.
Designer drug. That's what you mean by designer drug.
They haven't changed the loophole though. It's just they just keep making you new.
No,
chains.
some states have passed laws that say
really?
a substance that does these things instead of a certain substance. We got to go to Super Chats.
Yep.
So if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, get your questions in now in the Super Chats. We're going to be reading them, as many as we can, and become a member at timcast.com so you can watch the members-only uncensored show and submit questions through the Discord server to us. We will now read your Super Chats. Manipple says, happy 37th and 11/12ths.
Hey, congratulations.
Because I said on my morning show, I was like, I'm 38. Okay, well, I'm not 38, but I'll be 38 in less than a month. So I'm like basically 38. But like a 10-year-old, I am 37 3/4. I get to say that.
Do these people have these Super Chat people have like a calendar hanging up in their bedroom with your birthday marked out on it? And
I bet some of
they
them
check
do.
every box.
Yes. Well, no, I quite literally said it this morning that I'm 37th and 3/4.
If you made a calendar with
happy
your
birthday.
face on all 12 months, I bet you'd sell a lot of them.
And then I'm
gotta be
December
honest.
and it freaks everyone out.
I think if we made a calendar of anything, we'd sell a decent amount. But I think if we made a calendar of you, we'd sell more.
It'd have to be you sweaty after you're working out, skating. It's 12 different poses from 12 different days.
I want to see bikini pictures of you.
I have to be honest. I think an Ian calendar would sell better than a Tim calendar.
Let's get ripped and find out.
People would be like, Tim's kind of boring. I like hearing him.
Oh, they love you so much.
Yeah,
dude.
but you're like the Cajun spice. You know what I mean? Like,
But
you're
too
the
much
weirdo.
spice. It's like spice is like for a little bit. But you're the meal. You're the buffet.
Meat and potatoes. All right, let's read
the
more.
meat and the potatoes,
Jacob Parody says, after listening to the Joe Rogan interview with Aaron Rodgers recently, I realized that RFK Jr. would be the perfect VP pick for Trump. Joe Rogan would most likely endorse him. We've entertained that in the past, that RFK Jr. is an independent. Considering what he's polling at, I'm inclined to agree. Not that I want him to be the VP pick, but I think if Trump were to do that, I think it would crush Biden.
I tweeted out a clip recently from a Trump speech that RFK actually reposted and used it as a basis to directly go after Trump, at least more directly than I had seen in a while or maybe ever in terms of RFK attacking Trump. So I really doubt that's in the cards. I think both parties don't take fondly to independent parties, or both two main parties don't take kindly to third-party challengers, because especially in the case of RFK Jr., it's not exactly clear from which candidate he draws more support.
Oh, it is clear.
No, I think it's mixed if you look at the polling. Sometimes it's slightly more Biden, sometimes slightly more Trump, and it could vary based on the state.
If you go through RCP's average and 538's polling average, Kennedy is polling 2-1 from Democrats or more. Trump's base is solid at like 40 to 44%.
Yeah.
So any voter that's going to come out of that's not ditching Trump, unless it's like a swing voter as it was, but it's typically 3-1 or 2-1 Democrat. And
I think it's mixed.
Just track the polling.
I have.
We can pull it up
I
right
think it's
now.
slightly more of a Democratic lean in terms of who it draws from, but different polls show different things. And once polarization kicks in when the election approaches, meaning people who are more reticent about supporting one of the two major party candidates end up quote unquote coming home because they don't want to so-called throw away their vote, then you're going to see probably the third party support diminish across the board, not just RFK, but the other candidates. At least that's been the historical trend.
That makes a lot of sense, but I don't see a reality in which Trump supporters are like, well, I might vote for RFK instead.
No, I agree.
Biden voters are like, I don't want to vote for Joe Biden.
They don't really know what to do with RFK because the reason why he got so much attention within the past year or so was because he was at least ostensibly supposed to be running against Biden in the Democratic primary. So we saw a lot of conservative media really giving him a lot of hype, attention, because they wanted to just stick it to Biden, right? Because there would be an inconvenience for Biden, who wanted to run uncontested. Now that he went independent, it's less clear like whose partisan interest he necessarily serves.
Yeah.
I would love to see RFK Jr. and Trump reconcile their positions on Israel, though, because I think actually RFK is probably more stridently pro-Israel than even Trump, who boasts about being the most pro-Israel president of all time.
Let's read more. We got Yes Man. He says, "Skibidi toilet for president. Skibidi dum dum dum. Yes, yes." Ooh. Those videos are just completely insane, by the way. But I love the increasing unhingedness of what they are. Yeah, it reminds me of remember How To Basic?
Yeah.
And it's funny because like all the Gen Z people who are like, skibidi toilets, like, bro, you guys got to check out How To Basic. Do you know what that is?
No.
So it started on YouTube, and it was like how to put toilet paper on. Yeah. And then it's like just a single hand filming, and it like takes the roll off and puts toilet paper on. That's it. Then it's like the next video is like how to, clear a toilet. And it's just, putting the plunger in, plunge. How to open an umbrella. It's like very simple. Over time, they became increasingly more and more unhinged until it was like how to, yes, I know, don't. And it's a guy going, and he's smashing eggs and breaking windows and knocking it's just like over a long period of time, it got crazier and crazier. It was brilliant.
Yeah, that was like the golden era of YouTube.
Yeah.
I think this is still online. Yeah, I know.
What's it called? How to
Basic. It's like Max Mofo and those guys still make videos. I know that for sure. But
it was hilarious because you're like, wait, what? And he's like smashing eggs.
Yeah,
what's
golden
he doing?
Era, man.
It's like the Turn Down for What music video that just keeps getting increasingly insane as it goes on. I don't know why that song. I remember that song because it was in the Super Bowl.
It was.
All right, let's go. Kale says, Timcast crew, with crypto doing so well in the past few days, what are y'all's thoughts on if Elon would start using Doge as a form of payment on X? Let me check real quick what my thoughts are. My thoughts are, Elon, please do it. I have 9,000 Doge. How much is that? It was a lot more before. Yeah, it is $728 worth of Doge, and I don't know why I have it. It's just I do, and I bought it a long time ago, and I just didn't care. I bought it. It was worth absolutely nothing. It became worth a whole lot.
100,000th of a cent at some point.
Yeah,
I was like, what a trash coin.
I bought it when it was worth nothing. And then it jumped up to what did it get to?
8 cents right now. Oh, what
was it? Because didn't Elon tweet to buy it at one point?
Yeah,
or something?
like it was kind of like a culture jam.
It's like a meme thing, right?
Yeah.
Doge,
there's nothing behind it. It's not a good token. Like it doesn't. I don't think it really has any value other than just that it's funny.
What was it at 50 cents?
I mean, I could be wrong. If there's Doge experts out there that want to clarify, it was up
57.
To 68 cents.
68
on May 7th of 21.
I bought it a long time ago. And I don't think I bought it at peak. I think I bought it slightly after, and it jumped up, and I just ignored it completely.
It went from 0.02 of a cent to 68 cents. I mean, what is that? A 10?
I can't.
Didn't Elon Musk make the Twitter logo briefly the Doge icon? Or anyone remember that?
I don't know.
I can't.
Am I misremembering that? I think it happened.
I will not give anybody financial advice, but I was in Bitcoin when Bitcoin was 70 cents. And I like to tell this story about how I almost bought 6,733 Bitcoin, but my friend convinced me not to do it. At the time, it was 70 cents. It was like five some odd $1,000 worth of Bitcoin I was going to buy. Back then, in order to buy it, it was extremely difficult. You had to basically meet someone in person and have them watch them do the transfer. Mining was substantially easier. And when Bitcoin reached around $5, I got excited and sold, and I had like a couple $100, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. There's no reality in which I would have bought thousands of Bitcoin and then not sold at $20. It would have been insane. I would have been like, I got 50 grand. This is crazy. What do I do? And if I had it now, I'd be like a billionaire or whatever. But I will say this with no advice to anybody. I am happy, despite the fact it hit $100 and everyone said, you missed the train. I was like, wow, $100. If only I'd actually bought it. Now tell my friends, I almost bought thousands, 6,000. Imagine where I'd be at $600,000 if I had bought it and waited. Then when it got to 10K, I was like, oh my God, how much money would I have had?
It's almost at 50.
So when Bitcoin hit 13, I was like, every time Bitcoin jumps, I say the same thing. Oh my God, if only. So I just bought a bunch.
Zuby,
now it's at 50,000, and I'm like, wow.
I think Zuby tweeted out that he expects it to be at 1 million, but
Yes.
that 1 million will be worth what's worth 300,000 today
He's
because
right.
of inflation. So I thought that was kind of funny.
One Bitcoin has 8 decimal points behind it. It is effectively going to be $1 million. I predicted this, and I'm not the smartest guy on Bitcoin. Max Kaiser has predicted, I think, more than that. Max has been predicting somewhere around 200K relatively soon. Something called the halvening. Happens every couple of years.
April. It'll happen
It's happening in April, which means the cost to produce a Bitcoin is going to, I believe, double. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
That means that the people who are utilizing this will have to spend twice as much money, which means when a product costs more, has to be sold for more, the miners will then hold on to it. Then this will cause a strain in the market. People who are trying to buy or trade with it. El Salvador as a nation needs to do this, which means there is a weight to the value of Bitcoin. It will have to go up. Now, I'm not recommending anybody do anything because I have no idea what I'm talking about. All I can say is I bought a bunch of Bitcoin when it was at $1,300 because I was sick and tired of being like, I missed the train. I missed the train. I missed the train. How could I have been at Bitcoin when it was 70 cents and I didn't buy it? And now here I am looking at Bitcoin at $1,000 thinking the exact same thing. It's too expensive. When it was 70 cents, I said, who cares? It's worthless. When it's $1,000, I'm like, it's too expensive. And I said, no, I'm buying it. And I bought it. I'm very happy.
And I think that one thing people got to know about crypto is you don't have to buy one Bitcoin. You buy a percentage of a product that may or may not go up. So if you buy $2 worth of it and it goes up by 100%, then you make $2. So it's just really about the percentage of growth that you're investing in.
I'm looking at El Salvador as a nation using Bitcoin as a national currency. Rumors Argentina may do this under Milei. There will be an expansion of this. It's almost like if the whole world decided Bitcoin was worthless, El Salvador as a nation would still be using it and it would still have value in El Salvador. So there's a weight tied to the value of Bitcoin now forever, basically.
Does El Salvador, does it still tie its currency or peg its currency to the US dollar? Because Milei, I know, Milei, I know, made one of his campaign pledges to remain within the orbit or the ambit of
the US dollar.
The US dollar. As like an ideological principle.
I think, what happens is every time Bitcoin does a big spike, it has a drop off, a point when miners and other interested parties are like, okay, the price is up, we're going to sell and pull our profits. And then it drops down again. I remember when it hit 19,000 and people were mortgaging their homes to buy a bunch. Yep. And then it dropped down to 10 and they were like, my life is ruined. And if they just didn't sell, they'd be super rich.
Unless they took out a loan on margin to buy it. That's the problem. People are taking out these loans on margins. So they'll borrow money and then they'll use that money to buy the Bitcoin. And then if the value of the Bitcoin drops to a certain level, they're going to call a recall on the loan. And they're like, now we're going to use your own crypto that's worth half as much to pay off the loan. So you lose double your money. That's what happened during the Great Depression. A lot of people had been buying stock on margin. They've been taking out loans to buy stock. And when the stock market crashed, they had to pay all those back and they lost everything.
Go to what is it what's the subreddit for stock market gambling, stock market bets or whatever it's called? I don't know.
Oh, Wall Street Bets?
Wall Street Bets. And you see people who are like, well, I lost $200,000 of money I don't have.
Yo, those fools are crazy.
But my favorite is when they're like, I will not pay this back and there's nothing they can do about it.
Maybe Milei went to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem a few days ago. Did you see that where he's like tearfully up against the wall to like pray for crypto?
Sure. Let's read some super chats. Vincent Baker says big L's for Vosh and Hassan this week.
Yep.
Why?
Oh, do you want to get into it? You tell him, Serge.
Let's save that.
Let's go on the after show.
The Vosh thing's got to be saved for the after show.
Isn't Vosh's entire life an L?
I mean, like he's a millionaire, isn't he? So
maybe not. Maybe I should take the L.
Maybe everywhere I look, I see losers. Maybe I'm a loser.
Now hold on. My 2 big streams with him were not very pleasant.
Really. If Vosh is not a millionaire, I would be surprised, considering his following. He should be.
He does have a passionate following.
I enjoyed talking to him. That's what I should say. I don't know him very well. I've met him a couple times.
All right. Martin Edgar says, I may have to disagree on when the tit for tat started. I believe it started with the impeachment of Clinton. I also see this as the beginning of the advancement of the, what is it? Deify? I don't know what that is. Yep.
That's a good point. I was actually thinking of bringing it up, that you could argue that the tit for tat in terms of employing increasingly extreme or dramatic legislative tactics arguably did originate with the Bill Clinton impeachment, which was ultimately over a relatively trivial offense. I mean, you could argue that he actually did commit a high crime or misdemeanor per the standard that was in use at the time. But, underlying the offense was basically having an extramarital affair with a White House intern. Whereas now you have people always threatening each other with impeachment over treason or, selling out the country to Russia or all these other kind of crazy, much more grandiose accusations. It was much more ticky-tack stuff under Clinton, but it did accelerate the process whereby Congress became more comfortable using these more extreme measures.
All right. Void Raptor says, when the new studio is up, will we finally get Timcast in the Kitchen cooking show? So the studio is done completely. It needs decoration, and we're going to be putting up that Civil War flag that was donated to us. Really excited for that. Going to get it framed. And
that looks so cool.
Yeah, we'll get a glass frame for it.
Too.
We've got to move a lot of the art. We got to put up the guitars. The room is much bigger. I think it's 3 times as wide.
Significantly bigger.
Yeah, so it's a lot bigger, and we got to test things out. It is what it is. We'll have to do like testing cameras and depth of field and how things are going to look. But it's pretty cool. Kitchen's there. Everything's done. But the skate park construction is starting on Thursday, which means it's going to be very noisy for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we could literally go there right now and do the show.
And dusty, probably.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of wood, sawdust. There's going to be a big cleaning. So we're looking at 3 weeks. We didn't know when the skate park construction was going to begin. So we were actually planning on going. And then we would be like, as soon as the construction starts, we'll have to figure out what to do about the noise. But then we got the call that they're like, we're going to start the construction this week. And we're like, okay, I guess we're going to wait.
Yeah.
Just let them work overnight. Are they going to work overnight?
But we need decorations in the kitchen. So we actually, in the meantime, while they're doing skate park construction, we should have, there's an additional studio underneath the new IRL studio, which is going to be like a lounge style, sofa style podcast room. So we need that to be designed and set up, posters, art, things like that. And that has to get done ASAP. So we need someone to do it. But in the meantime, we're ready to go.
I'm excited about it.
And we may do a cooking show. I don't know. Maybe we'll just film Ian making lentils.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds
it's
delicious.
Like every week a different lentil recipe, but it's basically the same thing.
It's red lentils.
Red lentils, man. Let's grab some more super chats. James Lamb says, my cousin's house just burnt down. Her husband is sick and not currently working. Any help will be greatly appreciated. Give, send, go, Crystal Day. Good luck, sir. Sorry to hear. I hope everything works out well.
Man, best of luck.
The Sig P says, no need to halt the funding. Make Ukraine pay back all the money or we let Russia take all of Ukraine. You guys heard what Trump said, right? That some, NATO president said, if we don't pay, will you defend us? And he says, no. In fact, I'll encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want.
Everyone freaked out.
That was the most absurd freak out. It's so tedious at this point. People forget in 2016, in the 2016 campaign, there was an identical freak out that lasted months. I mean, it really flared up in the summer of 2016 and just continued in perpetuity beyond that, where it was just assumed that Trump was going to sell out the NATO alliance to Russia, that he was going to abandon Ukraine, that he didn't actually believe in the integrity of the NATO collective defense pact. Trump didn't do a single thing over 4 years to undermine NATO at all. In fact, he brags that he used negotiating tactics to extract additional funding commitments from NATO member states.
Great.
So Trump is brilliant for NATO. I mean, they should love him, but people get wrapped up in this completely fact-free hysteria that's divorced from what Trump actually did in office. That's what drives me crazy about this current Trump campaign. People who both hate Trump and love Trump are dealing with like a fantasy version of Trump. It's not 2016 where we'll have to speculate about what he would do if he was in power. He was in power for 4 years. Right. He actually armed Ukraine. He strengthened NATO. He brags about it. So the idea that you have like David Frum and these think tank people flipping out because Trump made some offhand remark recounting an anecdote, it just doesn't line up with what he actually did when he wielded the power. I mean, Trump is an American hegemonist, and NATO is a vehicle of preserving and expanding American hegemony. Trump doesn't have the liberal pretensions of some of these European, technocrats and stuff, but Trump is for maintaining American supremacy, and NATO is a means by which to do that. So the idea that he's going to abandon NATO is ridiculous. Sorry about my rant.
Let's read more. Rock Bra says, here in Brazil, to house someone in exchange for work is slavery by law.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Trippy. Yeah.
Dreamcast Knight says Massachusetts will probably make housing migrants mandatory. After all, no Second Amendment. Then 3 followed really fast, I guess. Is really getting out of hand, didn't it? It's funny, yeah. No Third Amendment, right? The government's going to be like, we're going to use your homes to quarter non-citizens, but they're not soldiers.
Right. I was
Although,
thinking about that. Like
that does
still
violate the
count
third.
if it's-
It does. It's,
yeah.
So
'Cause it's still quartering.
I
Somehow.
believe the Supreme Court ruling on the Third Amendment, because we talked about this a long time ago, was that the general concept of the Third Amendment is not quartering soldiers. It's the government using the private homes of citizens for its whims.
Yeah, I think there's only been one ruling on the Third Amendment, and it might have been the one you're talking about. It was like a long time ago. I'm not sure.
They were like the founders intended to prevent the government from using someone's private home for government.
What about their private
affairs.
business? Same thing? Like their hotel?
I'd assume, yeah.
They do that in California. I mean,
Yeah.
they basically like tell you have to fork over your hotel.
It's a pretty obscure area of American jurisprudence. It'd actually be interesting to see a more full-fledged decision on it.
All right. Noah R. says, I'm a 25-year-old male in the Northeast. I can barely afford an apartment and my bills. But sure, Michael, let's keep bringing these people into the country.
I didn't say
WTF.
let's keep bringing them in. I mean, that's what people misunderstand, I guess. Like I
No, but
specifically said that I'm not ideologically in favor of immigration.
But my point is the praising of people as industrious or good people.
Well, they could be industrious. Doesn't mean you're obliged to therefore bring them in, but they still could be an industrious person.
Right. The argument that, my argument was basically like, let's stop providing resources to people. They're creating a net detriment that will weaken and dissolve this country. And you argued against that. And I said,
I argued against that in the sense that I don't know that necessarily could be fairly ascribed to most individual migrants. Like that they're seeking to dissolve the country. I mean, I don't really see much evidence.
I didn't say seeking to dissolve the country.
What'd you say?
That they will dissolve the country through their. So I grew up.
I don't think their presence. I don't think there's much evidence to believe would result in the dissolution of the country.
But there is copious.
It's a matter of how many come in.
Let's
over
just
a
start
period
with
of
step
time.
one: remittance. Taking U.S. dollars out of the country damages an economy. This is why I
That's
talked
been
about
happening for ages.
That's why
And
they were
not-
limiting.
not at this rate.
So when you bring
remittances for a
more
while.
people in and you increase the amount that the U.S. dollar is being extracted from the country, the further you will damage the economy. That's just basic math. That's why I brought up Ithaca hours and other jurisdictions that created local currencies to prevent the dissolution of their local economies when the U.S. dollar was no longer was no longer coming into the region.
I don't know. There were times in the past where the percentage of the U.S. population that was foreign-born was higher substantially than now, and so I don't think that resulted in the country being dissolved.
Yeah, but they're
so I think it's a
illegal-
bit just of an overstatement.
They're illegal. They don't pay taxes. We pay taxes for them. It drains all of our money.
Yeah,
it's very simple.
I think you're talking about drastically different circumstances.
Yeah.
We're talking about our government spending hundreds of billions at a time of coming off mass inflation, mass government spending, the transformation of savings accounts into checking accounts causing a huge spike in the money supply, which freaks everybody out. The cost of goods are going up. I mean, they're like triple where they were a few years ago. Young people can't survive. And we're like, let's bring in millions of non-citizens and give them taxpayer resources. I mean,
But what do you mean?
But
What do you mean by dissolution of the country? Just like a lack of social or cultural cohesion, or are you talking about the actual American government apparatus being dissolved and becoming a failed state?
I think when you have Marjorie Taylor Greene call for you have members of Congress say it's time for a national divorce.
Yeah, she did say that.
We're getting dangerously close to these lines. When you have California getting some estimates as high as 5 to 7 extra electoral college votes and seats in Congress, like you're getting to the point where there is shattered confidence in what the United States is and does. Like, when was the last time, honest question, when was the last time a National Guard defied federal agents and barred them in defiance of federal jurisdiction?
I don't know. Interesting to look up.
But we've got to go
Congressional
to
Research Service,
the
look it
members
up.
only show. So if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Head over to timcast.com. If you'd like to hear more, you can join the Discord server. If you've been a member for at least 6 months at the $10 level, or you sign up today at the $25 level, you can submit questions to call in to talk to us and our guest and join the show. You can follow the show at Timcast IRL. You can follow me personally at Timcast. Michael, do you want to shout anything out?
Yeah. mtracy.net. I relaunched my personal publication Substack thingy last week, so there's a couple new posts up if people are interested. mtracy with an e.net, and then mtracy on Twitter/X.
Right on.
I'm Libby Emmons. You can find me on Twitter at Libby Emmons, and you can check out the work we're doing at thepostmillennial.com and humanevents.com.
Yeah, check me out at Ian Crossland. And really, that's all over the internet, dude. And if you want to see Tim sweaty and in a beanie, 12 days, 12 months, a year in a calendar, put one in the chat. I'll see you guys later.
Oh, man. I love your ideas, Ian. That's good stuff. Yeah, I'm Serge.com. I am looking forward to the after show. It should be spicy. Let's get to it, Tim.
We will see you all over at timcast.com in about 1 minute. Thanks for hanging out.